Chapter 2668. After leaving the blazing sun world, Ji Tianqing controlled the five elements world and rushed to the scattered star sea. It had been 2 years since that divine planet appeared in the scattered star sea. He couldn't help but worry if Marshal Dong and the heaven-conquering fleet were still on the divine planet. Could it be that they had already plundered all the divine items and left the divine planet? If he was late, he would have come here empty-handed, and it would have been a wasted trip. He only hoped that Marshal Dong's occupation of the divine planet wouldn't be so smooth. Only then would he have a chance to capture Marshal Dong and the fleet in one fell swoop and quickly stabilize the situation in the Azure Sun Galaxy. The scattered star sea was at the edge of the Azure Sun Galaxy and was very far from the blazing sun planet. Even if the five elements world flew at full speed, it still took more than a year to arrive. When they were close to the scattered star sea, Ji Tianqing, Bai Long, and the others stood on the divine light barrier and looked into the void ahead. They saw millions of scattered and chaotic stars gathered in the void to form an ocean. There was no order to the arrangement of the stars, nor was there any order to it. As far as the eye could see, they could see many vortexes formed by void storms and blazing white folded spaces. Clearly, the scattered star sea was not peaceful. There were too many hidden dangers and dangers. Bai Long frowned and said in a serious tone, "Master, the five elements world is too big. It can't enter the scattered star sea and move around freely." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Of course. I don't plan to let the five elements world enter the scattered star sea." With that, he took out the Tianqing battleship and led everyone and the four divine beasts into the battleship. Bai Long steered the Tianqing battleship and turned into a black light that entered the void and flew toward the scattered star sea. The five elements world stopped flying and stayed at the edge of the scattered star sea. With the protection of the divine light barrier, almost no one could invade the five elements world. Moreover, Ji Ku and Yun Yao stayed in the divine pagoda. If there was an ignorant fellow who dared to sneak into the five elements world, only death awaited him. The Tianqing battleship was thousands of feet long. Compared to the stars in the sky, it was so small that it could be ignored. But it was also because of this that the Tianqing battleship was very agile, easy to hide, and not easy to discover. White Dragon steered the warship through the chaotic star sea, heading straight for the depths of the stars. Even though the stars were densely packed with dangers. There were many void storms and divine flames, many folded spaces, and even a black hole. However, the White Dragon could always detect danger in advance and easily avoid dangerous areas. 1 month later. Through the light screen in the warship, everyone saw a dazzling golden star appear in the void in front of them. That star was quite special. It shone with dazzling golden light, appearing extremely mysterious. In comparison, the dozens of stars in the surroundings were somewhat overshadowed. The golden star was very big, but only half of it was left. It was like an apple that had been broken in half. Everyone could recognize at a glance that that half-golden star was precisely the divine star they were looking for. White Dragon was in high spirits as he piloted the Tianqing battleship towards the divine star. It only took 5 days for the battleship to pass through the damaged golden light shield and land on the divine planet. As the battleship flew on the surface of the divine planet, White Dragon's expression was focused on the surroundings, vigilant. Ji Tianqing and the others released their divine senses to investigate the land on the surface of the divine planet, carefully observing it. They saw that the vast land was filled with cracks, forming tens of thousands of ravines. One after another, deep abysses and giant pits were scattered across the land. Many forests and mountain peaks were buried within, as well as villages and cities. The ruins of the shattered cities were filled with broken bricks and broken walls, still recounting the glory of the past. The layout of the cities, the style of the buildings, and the many divine temples and statues were just as General Guo had said. They were filled with a divine and dignified feeling. Ji Tianqing could tell at a glance that this was obviously the style of the divine world. The battleship flew close to the land for 8 hours, seeing hundreds of collapsed and damaged cities, but not a single living thing. Not only did they not see a living person, they also did not see a single corpse. At this moment, a huge ruin appeared on the vast plains in front of them. Piles of bricks and glazed tiles, as well as sturdy and thick broken walls, were scattered across the land in a radius of 400 miles. Everyone could see that this ruin was once a glorious main city that could hold at least 5 million people. However, all of the prosperity had been buried, and the ruin was covered with a layer of ash. Ji Tianqing extended his divine sense and covered the entire ruin, carefully inspecting it. Suddenly, he sensed the presence of the Heaven Punisher at the center of the ruin. "Stop!" he immediately ordered. White Dragon immediately did as he was told and had Tianqing's battleship stop above the ruin. Ji Tianqing's divine sense continued to search, and he quickly found out what was going on. There was a giant pit in the center of the ruin, and under the cover of countless bricks and rubble, there was a remnant of a divine temple. The style of the divine temple was very unique. It was ancient, dignified, sacred, and mysterious. There were tall and grand palaces, countless giant stone pillars, and stone sculptures and divine portraits everywhere. A group of Heaven Punisher experts was searching for something in the divine temple. Nearly 200 black-armored warriors, armed with swords, sabers, and spears, surrounded the temple. 2 captains in golden armor were carefully inspecting the divine temple with 20 guards. In addition, Ji Tianqing's divine sense also detected the presence of a martial god of a foreign tribe hiding in the darkness at the bottom of the divine temple. He could not help but murmur, "It seems that Marshal Dong Zhendong is still in control of the situation." The martial gods of the foreign tribes are not willing to leave, so they can only hide from the Heaven Punishers. Then, he left Tianqing's battleship with Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts. Whoosh! 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 The group flew across the sky and arrived above the giant pit. Their divine senses locked onto the divine temple in the ruins. They did not hide their presence, nor did they hide their presence. They appeared openly. The Heaven Punishers surrounding the divine temple immediately discovered Ji Tianqing and the others. Immediately, more than 50 black-armored warriors waved their swords and charged at the group. Ji Tianqing and his sons did not even need to attack. The glass fire dragon opened its mouth and spat out glass golden flames, which covered the sky and drowned the black-armored warriors. Whoosh! Under the glass golden flames, the 50 black-armored warriors had no chance to dodge or resist. They were burned to ashes. The bricks and rubble that buried the divine temple were also burned into dark red lava, which flowed into the giant pit and cracks. The ruined divine temple was revealed. More than 100 surviving black-armored warriors also showed expressions of anger and fear. Cries of alarm came from the crowd. A few captains roared angrily and gave the order to attack together. However, Qian Yu and Black Dragon used divine techniques at the same time, releasing icy light and black water that covered the sky. Whoosh! Boom! Under the icy blue light, dozens of black-armored warriors were frozen to dust. The North Underworld black water fell from the sky and corroded the surviving black-armored warriors into white bones. In the blink of an eye, the area outside the divine temple was empty. Chapter 2669. The commotion from the battle had alerted the Heaven Punishers in the divine temple. Sui Meng Xiao Shua Suimen Kam. When the 2 captains rushed out of the divine temple with their guards, they were dumbfounded by the scene before them. The divine temple was covered in lava and black water, but the 200 black-armored warriors had disappeared without a trace. The 2 captains looked up at the sky and glared at Ji Tianqing and the others with hatred. There was a hint of fear in their eyes. The 20 black-armored guards were also at a loss. They did not know whether they should take the initiative to attack or not. At this moment, the captain on the left took out a communication jade slip. He wanted to send a message and ask for reinforcements. Lon Kuan did not hesitate to spit out 6 pillars of water toward the heaven punishers. Boom, 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 boom. The poor captain did not even have time to send a message before he was blasted into pieces by the water pillars. The other captain and the 20 black armored guards did not have time to escape. They were all killed on the spot by the water pillars. The terrifying impact turned the already dilapidated divine temple into a pile of rubble. Not a single stone pillar or tile could be found. At this point, the 200 or so heaven punishers had all been killed. Lon Kuan closed its huge mouth in satisfaction and secretly glanced at Ji Tianqing. It originally thought that since Qian Yu, the Black Dragon, and Azure Li had all fought, it should also perform. Ji Tianqing would definitely praise it for interrupting the other party's message in such a timely manner. However, it did not expect Ji Tianqing to frown slightly. A hint of pity flashed across his eyes. Lon Kuan's eyes dimmed. It was a little depressed, but it did not understand the reason. Ji Wushuang saw through its thoughts and explained to it, "Big fish, you shouldn't have interrupted the captain's transmission, and you shouldn't have killed them all. If that captain had sent a message, more heaven punishers would have been attracted. We could have killed them all and saved a lot of time. Also, I originally wanted to leave one alive to interrogate the heaven punishers." Lon Kuan nodded to show that he understood. He looked at Ji Tianqing apologetically and said in a muffled voice, "Master, I'm sorry." Ji Tianqing calmly waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter. They are just some shrimp soldiers and crab generals. As for information, isn't there another person in the temple?" As he spoke, he looked at the ruins of the temple with a playful gaze. His tone was calm as he said, "Why aren't you showing yourself? How long do you plan to hide?" In order to make the other party understand, he did not use the human language. Instead, he used the heaven-punishing race's language. The aura of the martial god under the temple paused for a moment. However, that aura was immediately restrained, hiding even deeper. Ji Tianqing immediately smiled. He raised his hand and shot out a golden sword light, piercing into the darkness underground. Boom! The sword light pierced through the ruins and blasted into the ground, exploding with a muffled bang. Countless rocks and soil were blasted away, causing dust to fill the air. However, the sword light did not contain any killing intent when it struck the martial god's aura. However, the owner of that aura was alarmed. He instinctively moved 10,000 feet away, revealing his whereabouts. He knew that his whereabouts had been discovered. While he was shocked, he hesitated for a moment before burrowing out of the ground and flying into the sky. Whoosh! A tall figure covered in black fog appeared in the sky above the ruins. He stood 10,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing and the others. Within the rising black fog was a martial god of a foreign race who was 30 feet tall and looked like a minotaur. This person wore a loose black robe and a cloak. He held a black cloth banner in his hand. Ji Tianqing could tell at a glance that the simple and shabby banner was a divine artifact. It could hide one's aura. No wonder he could hide under the temple and avoid the heaven-punishing race's search. It's because of that banner. That banner should be a divine artifact he found on the divine planet. It was originally a heavenly god-level divine artifact, but it has been damaged and has been reduced to a true god-level divine artifact. Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the martial god of a foreign race bowed to him and said in the heaven-punishing race's language, "Thank you, Senior, for saving me. I am Wild Bull, the divine master of the fog planet. If Senior had not saved me, I would have been killed. This humble one will never forget this kindness." The fog planet where Wild Bull was from had also been taken over by the heaven-punishing race. He had fought with the heaven-punishing race for more than 100 years. Of course, he had mastered their language. He could see that not only was Ji Tianqing's strength unfathomable, but even the 4 divine beasts were also very powerful. Thus, he was very respectful. He did not dare to be impudent or run away. Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said, "Wild bull, you don't have to play tricks in front of me. I killed the heaven-punishing race because I happened to pass by. The heaven-punishing race deserved to die. I did not do it to save you. In fact, even if I did not do anything, you could have escaped the heaven-punishing race's search with the banner in your hand." A few simple words had seen through Wild Bull's thoughts and revealed the truth. Wild Bull's body shook slightly. Surprise flashed through his bell-sized eyes, and his posture became even more humble. Senior's eyes are as sharp as torches. Wild Bull admires you greatly. It was Wild Bull who judged a gentleman with his own mean heart. I have embarrassed myself in front of Senior. Please forgive me. Since Senior has ordered Wild Bull to appear, you must have something to teach me. Please tell me. Ji Tianqing smiled when he saw Wild Bull's response. He nodded slightly and said, "You look like a brute, but you are actually clever and adaptable. You are a talent that can be molded. Since you are so sensible, I will not waste my breath and will say it directly. I am not here to search for treasures. I am here to deal with Marshal Dong. You have been active on this planet for a long time. You should know the whereabouts of the heaven-punishing fleet and Marshal Dong, right?" "What?" Wild Bull was shocked. He raised his head and looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. "Senior. You really want to deal with Marshal Dong? That bastard is a true god expert who controls the entire Azure Sun galaxy. Moreover, he has mobilized more than 100 heaven-punishing fleet captains and more than 8,000 heaven-punishing soldiers to explore this broken planet. He is very powerful." Before Ji Tianqing could speak, Ji Wushuang said proudly, "You stupid bull, since my father is here to deal with Marshal Dong, he is very confident. Why do you need to worry? Do you know who my father is? Previously, in the Purple Cloud Galaxy, my father killed Marshal Dong and destroyed the entire South conquering fleet. Along the way, we have killed more than 100,000 heaven punishers and saved more than 100 worlds. Soon, the East conquering fleet will collapse, and the Azure Sun galaxy will regain its freedom. At that time, my father will be the saint who saved the Azure Sun galaxy. However, my father has always been indifferent to fame and fortune. He will not bicker with a stupid bull like you." Wild Bull stared at Ji Wushuang, dumbfounded. His body stiffened, and his heart was in turmoil. After a long while, he came back to his senses and stuttered, "Young heroine, may I ask, who is your father?" Ji Wushuang answered proudly, "He is the invincible god of war Tianqing, the nemesis of the heaven punishers." Chapter 2670. Ji Wushuang answered smoothly with an arrogant expression. Ji Tianqing, Ji Wuhan, and the 4 divine beasts all had calm expressions on their faces, as if nothing had happened. However, the father and son and the 4 divine beasts were all muttering in their hearts. "Sigh, this girl is really, father's name of Kenshin is famous throughout the universe. Why did Yaya change father's name?" However, Wild Bull could not tell whether Ji Wushuang was telling the truth or not. Since the other party was so confident and arrogant, and his strength was so mysterious, then he would just believe it. Wild Bull's attitude became even more humble, and he even showed some admiration as he bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Junior Wild Bull pays his respects to War God Tianqing. Junior is ignorant and did not know of Senior's great achievements. You have saved the entire star field and saved millions of warriors and people. It is Wild Bull's good fortune to meet a saint like Senior in this life. A lot of flattery poured out like a flood, but Ji Tianqing did not have the patience to listen and interrupted him with a wave of his hand. You don't have to say these hypocritical words. Just tell me everything you know about Marshal Dong. Wild Bull also knew when to stop. After confirming that Ji Tianqing did not have any ill intentions, he did not speak any more nonsense to avoid offending him. He did not hesitate to say yes and answered truthfully, "Senior Tianqing, I came to this broken star a year ago. At that time, Marshal Dong led hundreds of battleships to plunder treasures on this broken star and killed martial gods and explorers of various races. However, the martial gods, explorers, and space pirates of various races came one after another, and the broken star was too big. Even though Marshal Dong was powerful, he did not have enough manpower. Therefore, Junior and the many martial gods and explorers all had a fluke heart. We searched for treasures on this broken star while avoiding the pursuit of the heaven punishers. Marshal Dong also sped up the search for treasures and gathered more battleships to support us. Junior received news a few days ago that a group of space pirates found a paradise in a mountain range thousands of miles away. There were a lot of divine weapons and treasures hidden there. When the East conquering Marshal heard the news, he had already gathered a large group of heaven punishers to snatch it. Junior's strength is weak, so naturally, I don't dare to wade into the muddy waters. I can only eat a sumptuous meal in a remote place. When he heard this, Ji Tianxing understood and nodded to show that he understood. He then asked Wild Bull about the specific location of the mountain range and other questions. Wild Bull was very sensible. After answering respectfully, he bowed and said, "Senior, if you don't have any other instructions, this junior will take his leave." Ji Tianxing waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Only then did Wild Bull feel as if he had been granted amnesty. He hurriedly bowed and left before turning around and flying away. When he left the ruins, he realized that his back was drenched in sweat, and beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead. There was nothing he could do about it. Ji Tianxing's divine might was too heavy, and the pressure he felt was too terrifying. He had a vague premonition that trouble was coming for Marshal Zhendong. Ji Tianxing and the others were not in a hurry to leave. Everyone stood above the ruins and released their divine senses to explore the temple below. Not long after, Tianxing's battleship flew over from afar. Swoosh! Bai Long flew out of the battleship, his hands flickering with golden light as he grabbed a large pile of rubble. He placed over 100 pieces of rubble in front of Ji Tianxing and said with a strange expression, "Master, look at these." Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the four divine beasts all looked at the rubble with puzzled expressions. "It's just some rubble. What's there to see?" "Old Bai, why are you looking for these rubble instead of divine artifacts and treasures?" Ji Tianxing frowned as he sized up the pile of rubble. He immediately saw the clues. These rubble contain rich divine power of faith. It's obvious that they're often worshipped by believers. "Bai Long, are these the divine stones from the broken statue?" Bai Long hurriedly nodded and explained, "That's right. I had nothing to do just now, so I searched the ruins and noticed this pile of rubble buried underground. I simply pieced these rubble together, and sure enough, it's a statue. Moreover, there's something wrong with that statue." As he spoke, Bai Long quickly waved his hands and pieced those millstone-sized rubble together piece by piece. Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang also became interested and hurriedly helped him piece the rubble together. After a short 10 breaths, over 100 pieces of rubble were pieced together to form a statue of a god that was dozens of meters tall. Moreover, this statue only had the upper body and the head. The rest of the statue was incomplete. It could be foreseen that if it was a complete statue, its height would be close to 300 meters. Swoosh! Bai Long shot out a golden light that wrapped around 100 pieces of rubble, gluing them together and presenting them in front of Ji Tianxing. "Master, look. Doesn't this statue look a bit like it?" Ji Tianxing looked at the statue that was full of cracks and immediately frowned. A strange light flashed in his eyes. It was a statue of a god with a human body and an eagle head that was suffused with gold. Although the statue was full of cracks, the carvings were exquisite and lifelike. This god with a human body and an eagle head had a vigorous body and a slender neck. The eagle head was round and majestic, and there were 3 golden feathers on top of its head. Its dark golden eyes also protruded outwards. Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts couldn't see where the problem was. They only knew that this god should be the master of the god star, the god king worshipped by billions of believers. Only Ji Tianqing and Bai Long knew that they knew this god and were familiar with it. God King Heavenly Eagle, it must be him. After a long time, Ji Tianqing sighed with a complicated tone and said, I didn't expect that today, after 1,000 years, we'd be reborn and he'd fall. Sigh. Bai Long was also full of emotion. He said in a heavy tone, God King Heavenly Eagle had always been aloof from worldly affairs. He was a famous king of 1,000 mountains. Even when that storm swept across the god realm, he didn't participate. He shouldn't have any enemies, and his strength was not ordinary. He could be ranked in the top 100 of the god king list. How could he be killed by other god kings? Hearing Ji Tianqing and Bai Long's discussion, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts became more and more confused. Qian Yu couldn't help but ask, Old Ji, is this god king Heavenly Eagle the master of the god star? What's your relationship with him? Are you friends or? Ji Tianqing remained silent, a thoughtful expression on his face. Bai Long answered, God King Heavenly Eagle was the master of the 1,000 Mountains region. He ruled over hundreds of divine kingdoms and was also the king of gods. He was gentle and open-minded, and basically didn't participate in the disputes for fame and fortune. Most of the time, he was in seclusion to comprehend the great Tao. That's why he was called the King of Leisure. Back then, Master controlled the Heavenly Mountain region, which was right next to the 1,000 Mountains region. Not only did Master and God King Heavenly Eagle have no conflicts or grievances, they even helped each other and joined hands to resist the persecution of other God Kings. So, he was one of Master's few friends. Unfortunately, after 1,000 years, things have remained the same but people have changed. He actually fell. Chapter 2671. After Bai Long's explanation, everyone finally understood the relationship between Ji Tianqing and Heavenly Eagle Deity King. No one would have thought that the owner of this fallen god star was actually Ji Tianqing's old friend. Everyone's mood was somewhat heavy as they sighed and lamented. At this time, Bai Long saw that Ji Tianqing's expression was strange and opened his mouth to ask, Master, are you thinking about the cause of Heavenly Eagle Deity King's death? Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and nodded slightly, saying, That's right, Heavenly Eagle Deity King rarely offended people and his own strength was also not bad. There were not many who could kill him. Master is thinking, could it be that those bastards saw that Heavenly Eagle Deity King and Master had a friendship and took their anger out on him? Bai Long hurriedly shook his head and advised, Master, although this is possible, before the matter is clear, you shouldn't make a rash decision, and even more so, don't blame yourself for this. Ji Tianqing looked up at the void with a deep gaze and said in a solemn tone, For many years, Master has always had a bad premonition. The current God realm is probably no longer the same as back then. For us to return to the God realm and take revenge, it will definitely be extremely dangerous. But no matter what, Master has to kill his way back. Not only do I have to take revenge back then, I also have to investigate the cause of Heavenly Eagle Deity King's death. Bai Long nodded his head in agreement and did not say anything. The atmosphere was somewhat heavy. Everyone stared blankly for a moment before boarding Tianqing's battleship and flying towards the north. According to Wild Bull, tens of millions of miles away in the north, there was an endless stretch of towering, majestic mountain range. The paradise discovered by the space pirates was in that mountain range. At present, Marshal Dong had already brought a large group of powerhouses and rushed over. This was an excellent opportunity to Ji Tianqing, how could he miss it? On the way, the group saw the shattered land. Everywhere, there were cities that had turned into ruins, and temples that had collapsed. Occasionally, they would encounter some foreign martial gods or explorers that roamed the starry skies, carefully searching in the ruins. Other than that, they actually did not see a single believer on the god star, not even a corpse. 6 hours later, Tianqing's battleship flew over the sky above a certain ruin and suddenly encountered a heaven-conquering battleship. That battleship was also hurrying along, heading straight for the north. It seemed to have some sort of mission on its shoulders. Even when it sensed the existence of Tianqing's battleship, it had no intention of attacking or intercepting. However, even if it did not provoke the Tianqing battleship, it did not mean that Tianqing would let it go. Shua! With a flash, Tianqing flew out of the battleship. He flickered in the sky, and after a few teleportations, he caught up with the heaven-conquering battleship. He took out the burial of heaven's sword and slashed it fiercely. The dazzling golden sword light that was thousands of feet long slashed toward the battleship with the power to split the heavens and earth. At the critical moment, the heaven-conquering battleship sensed that death was approaching, and it hurriedly dodged. However, the speed of the warship was too slow, and it was unable to dodge the sword light. Boom! With a loud bang, the heaven-slicing battleship was cut in half and fell from the sky. More than 30 soldiers in black armor flew out from the wreckage of the warship. Before they could stabilize their bodies, Tianqing swung his sword and slashed out a few more dazzling golden sword lights. Shua! 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 With a flash of the sword light, the more than 30 soldiers in black armor were killed on the spot. The two halves of the battleship were about to fall to the ground. Tianqing swung his left fist and used the Dragon Elephant Divine Fist, slamming it fiercely toward the wreckage of the warship on the left. He swung the burial of heaven's sword with his right hand and slashed out a giant sword light that could split the heavens and earth, slashing toward the half of the warship on the right. The dozens of surviving soldiers in black armor flew out of the warship in a panic, trying to escape. The captain in golden armor also rushed out of the warship furiously and swung his sword at Tianqing. However, their resistance and escape were futile. Kaboom! With a loud bang, the wreckage of the warship on the left was blasted into pieces, and the dozens of soldiers in black armor were smashed into pieces. A huge crater with a radius of 100 miles was created on the ground, and dust flew up into the sky. Boom! The half of the warship on the right was also smashed into pieces by the giant sword. The captain in golden armor was directly killed, and pieces of flesh and blood splattered all over the sky. The giant sword landed on the ground, creating a deep ravine that was 300 miles long, like an abyss. The dozen or so surviving black-armored warriors all ran away in fear. Tianqing chased after them and killed them all with a few swings of his sword. After quickly finishing off the Tianqing battleship, Tianqing did not stop and hurriedly returned to the Tianqing battleship. The Tianqing battleship continued on its journey and did not waste any time. As time passed, the Tianqing battleship was getting closer and closer to its target. In the next 2 days, the group passed by hundreds of ruined cities and found a few adventurers. In addition, they also encountered 3 Tianqing battleships, which were ordered to rush to support Marshal Zhendong. The fate of the 3 Tianqing battleships was no surprise. They were all killed by Tianqing and turned into dregs. 3 days later, the Tianqing battleship finally arrived at its destination and flew into the majestic and boundless mountain range. The mountain range was huge and stretched for millions of miles from east to west. It was filled with peaks, deep ravines, and ravines. Most of the peaks had collapsed and the ravines and abysses were filled with debris. However, compared to the fragmented land, the mountain range was relatively well preserved. Bai Long drove the battleship and shuttled between the mountains, searching for the entrance to the Blessed Enclave. Tianqing released his divine consciousness and explored the surrounding tens of thousands of miles, constantly monitoring the surrounding movements. 4 hours later, the Tianqing battleship entered the depths of the mountain range. At this time, Tianqing found some scattered martial gods of the foreign tribes in the surrounding mountain range. Most of them formed teams and moved together. There were a total of more than a dozen teams, with at least 3 to 5 people and at most a dozen people. They were all powerful experts. Moreover, most of the teams had battleships and flying divine artifacts. The more than a dozen treasure-hunting teams, like Ji Tianqing and the others, were also wandering around the mountain range, searching for the entrance to the Blessed Enclave. Obviously, they had also heard the news and wanted to get a share of the loot. However, they could not find the entrance to the Blessed Enclave, so they could only search blindly in the mountain range. Ji Tianqing ignored the exploration teams and asked Bai Long to continue to the depths of the mountain range. The Tianqing battleship moved alone and flew north without stopping. This made many exploration teams focus their attention on the Tianqing battleship and follow it quietly. An hour later, the Tianqing battleship encountered a heaven-conquering battleship. The battleship seemed to know where the entrance to the Blessed Enclave was. It flew across the sky at an extremely fast speed and went straight to the northwest. Ji Tianqing quickly followed and destroyed the battleship with his sword alone. He killed hundreds of black-armored soldiers and captured the severely injured captain of the gold-armored battleship. Then, he used the soul-searching secret skill to extract the memory of the gold-armored battleship and learn the entrance to the Blessed Enclave. Chapter 2672. The exploration teams following the Tianqing battleship wanted to take advantage of the situation. They also wanted to stop the heaven-attacking battleship, capture the captain, and interrogate him about the location of the Blessed Land. However, they had witnessed Ji Tianqing's power with their own eyes. He had easily destroyed the heaven-attacking battleship and killed many heaven-attacking experts by himself with a divine sword. Such ferocious and overbearing methods caused all the martial gods of the foreign races to be shocked, and they were flabbergasted. In fear, they could only give up on the idea. The 9 teams followed the Tianqing battleship and flew northwest. Inside the Tianqing battleship, Bai Long frowned when he saw the 9 teams following them. A cold light flashed in his eyes. "Master, those reckless fellows are most likely following us because they want to take advantage of the situation and fish in troubled waters. Do you want me to teach them a lesson?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with an indifferent expression, "Those foreign martial gods and explorers have no grudge against us, but they have a deep grudge against the Heaven Punisher race. Don't worry about them. They might be useful when we get there." "Understood," Bai Long replied and continued to control the battleship. Soon, the Tianqing battleship arrived above a huge valley. The valley was 500 miles wide. It was like a basin in the mountains and was covered by clouds. There were more than a dozen mountains around the valley. They were like loyal and brave guards guarding the valley's secret. This was the entrance to the Blessed Land. There was no one around the valley. Those who did not know would not have noticed this place. Even the valley that was shrouded in clouds and mist was desolate and quiet. There were no traces of any martial artists. However, Ji Tianqing's fiery golden eyes saw through it immediately. The entire valley was shrouded in a true god-level bewildering array. On the surface, the valley was shrouded in clouds and mist, looking very ordinary. However, there must be a large number of heaven-attacking warriors gathered in the valley. Swish! Ji Tianqing put away the battleship and stood above the valley, looking down at the clouds. White Dragon, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts all stood behind him, sizing up the surroundings. The 9 exploration teams had followed them to this place. When they saw Ji Tianqing and the others stop and put away their battleships, they hurriedly stopped as well. Everyone realized that there was something wrong with this valley. It was most likely the entrance to the Blessed Enclave. At the thought of this, many foreign race martial gods and explorers were excited and full of anticipation. However, they were afraid of Ji Tianqing's terrifying strength and didn't dare to step into the valley. They all stayed at the edge of the valley and silently watched Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He swung his fist and unleashed a dazzling golden fist aura that was as big as a mountain, blasting towards the clouds beneath his feet. Instantly, the terrifying fist radiance struck the maze formation. If the strength of the fist glow was only at the martial god realm, it would be absorbed and dissolved by the formation immediately. But the power of this punch of Ji Tianqing's reached peak true god. Boom! A deafening sound exploded and reverberated in the sky above the valley. The invisible maze formation was activated. A 500-mile-wide purple light barrier appeared in the clouds. However, the semicircular purple light barrier was smashed into pieces by the fist radiance, creating a huge hole. Countless purple light fragments scattered and created a hurricane in the sky above the valley. The 9 teams around the valley, more than 60 foreign race martial gods, were all shocked, surprised, and expectant. The appearance of the purple light barrier confirmed their guess. The valley in front of them was the entrance to the Blessed Enclave. The greedy and shameless East-conquering marshal had set up a divine formation to seal the valley. He wanted to take the Blessed Enclave for himself. If it weren't for Ji Tianqing's powerful strength, the dozens of foreign race martial gods would have been ready to take action. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing and the others passed through the gap in the purple light barrier and landed in the valley. When they passed through the clouds and entered the maze formation, they finally saw the true situation in the valley. They saw the ruins of a huge palace in the middle of the valley. There was a huge dilapidated divine temple in the ruins. Countless broken walls and broken stone pillars could be seen. The divine temple was surrounded by ancient rocks and was guarded by more than 300 black-armored warriors. In addition, there were thousands of Heaven Punisher warriors around the palace ruins. They held sharp swords and were on high alert. There were 24 Heaven Punisher martial gods in golden armor in the sky above the divine temple ruins. They were arranged in a special formation. More than 1,300 members of the Heaven Punisher clan formed 3 layers of defense around the dilapidated temple. Their protection was impenetrable. Ji Tianqing and the others immediately understood the obvious formation. The entrance to the Blessed Enclave was that ancient dilapidated divine temple. At this moment, the 24 golden-armored martial gods roared angrily. They raised their arms and shouted out orders. More than 200 black-armored warriors immediately flew out from the outermost layer of defense. They charged toward Ji Tianqing and the others without any regard for their own safety. They surrounded and attacked them with murderous intent. In an instant, an overwhelming amount of red light flew over and covered the sky above the valley. Thousands of saber lights, sword shadows, giant axes, long sabers, and ferocious and terrifying phantoms drowned Ji Tianqing and the others. However, Ji Tianqing stood with his hands behind his back. He looked calm and didn't intend to attack. Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang and the 4 divine beasts waved their swords and released divine powers that could destroy the world. All kinds of white, golden, icy blue, black, and crimson divine light poured down like a flood. Boom, 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 boom. A series of earth-shattering noises exploded in the valley and resounded in the universe. The valley within a radius of 500 miles shook violently, and the surrounding mountain peaks shook as well, causing countless rocks and dust to roll down. Such a terrifying explosion caused the exploration teams that had just stepped into the valley to stop in their tracks, their hearts filled with shock. When the lights in the sky disappeared, everyone finally saw the scene in the valley. Ji Tianqing and the others weren't injured at all. They stood in the sky like mountains. More than 200 murderous warriors of the heavenly expedition collapsed, turning into a pile of flesh and blood that scattered in the ruins. Suddenly, dozens of martial gods and explorers couldn't help but gasp. The 24 golden-armored martial gods, who were guarding the ruins and the divine temple, also changed their expressions dramatically, revealing a deep sense of fear. The next moment, those golden-armored martial gods came back to their senses and hurriedly shouted and roared. Strong enemies are invading. Stop them. Kill them immediately at all costs. What are you waiting for, you idiots? So, more than 1,000 black-armored warriors attacked Ji Tianqing and the others. The 24 golden-armored martial gods also formed a battle formation and jointly performed divine powers and secret arts, releasing purple light into the sky. Such an astonishing and terrifying attack was enough to raise thousands of miles of mountains to the ground. The 9 exploration teams quickly retreated from the valley, afraid that they would be affected. However, Ji Tianqing, Bai Long, and the others were fearless as they launched their counterattacks in an orderly manner. Chapter 2673. Bam! 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 Boom! Boom! Deafening booms and explosions from the collision of divine lights reverberated in the valley. This battle with a huge disparity in numbers only lasted for 100 breaths before it ended. The more than 60 martial gods from the 9 teams were worried for Ji Tianqing and the others. After all, the difference in numbers between the two sides was more than 100 times. Moreover, the divine light that covered the sky and the sun shrouded the valley. They could not see Ji Tianqing and the others at all. Many martial gods and explorers hoped that Ji Tianqing and the others would win. Even though this was not very realistic and there was little hope. Perhaps Ji Tianqing and the others would have to pay a terrible price to win. That was what everyone wanted to see. Only when Ji Tianqing and the others killed all the heaven punishers could they enter the grotto heaven and blessed lands to explore the fortuitous opportunity. Not long after, the dazzling divine light dissipated. The deafening sounds of collisions and explosions gradually stopped. The chaotic valley gradually became clear. Only then did the martial gods and adventurers see the situation in the valley clearly. They saw that the ruins within 100 miles had completely disappeared. All that was left was a huge crater and a few dozen huge pieces of gravel. Those were the remaining rocks from the temple that had been destroyed. In the messy pile of rocks, there was a door shining with golden light. It was intact. Without a doubt, that was the entrance to the grotto heaven and blessed lands. After the ruins were completely destroyed, the entrance to the divine array was revealed. As for the 1,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army who were guarding the entrance, as well as the 24 captains of the heaven-conquering army, they had all disappeared. The pit was littered with corpses and broken pieces of weapons and armor. It was obvious what had happened to the heaven punishers and the golden-armored martial gods. As for Ji Tianqing and the others, they were standing above the pit. There were still 4 people and 4 divine beasts. Not a single one was missing. Seeing this, the dozens of alien martial gods and explorers were all shocked. They widened their eyes in shock. No one could believe that the outcome of the battle would be like this. 4 people and 4 beasts, against more than 1,000 heaven punishers, were actually able to annihilate all of them while their own side remained unscathed. The word powerful was not enough to describe the terrifying combat strength of Ji Tianqing and the others. Pervert. Monster. Terrifying. Unbelievable. Who are those experts? How can he be so powerful? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it even if you beat me to death. The martial gods and explorers in the various teams all exclaimed and discussed. At this time, Ji Tianqing and the others landed in the deep pit and stepped into the golden door one after another. Swoosh! Whoosh! Swish! Several golden lights flashed, and the figures of the 4 people and the 4 divine beasts disappeared. Silence returned to the valley. The dozens of martial gods and explorers finally came to their senses. After a moment of hesitation, one of the teams took the lead and flew into the deep pit, entering the golden light gate one after another. With someone taking the lead, there were immediately others who followed suit. The other teams were afraid that they would fall behind and lose the initiative, so they all entered the light door one after another. As the golden light flashed, Ji Tianqing and the others arrived at an alternate dimension. The dimension was vast and had a radius of at least 100,000 miles. Unlike the dilapidated and decaying scene on the divine planet, this dimension was very well preserved. The vast expanse of land was covered with green grasslands, flowers, and fruits. In the distance, there was a vast mountain range, which revealed a hazy outline under the golden light. The air was filled with extremely rich divine power, which even condensed into gold and silver light ribbons that floated in the sky. High in the sky, there were two huge stars hanging. One was golden, like the scorching sun. The other was silver, like the bright moon. At this time, the bright moon's light was dim, and the scorching sun's golden light illuminated the entire dimension. Without a doubt, it was daytime in this dimension. Ji Tianqing and the others could see that the two stars high in the sky were real. A powerful deity had used his supreme divine power to move two stars and imitate the sun and the moon. Such abundant divine power. As expected of a blessed place. The cultivation resources here are really abundant to the extreme. Even a pig can become a deity after living here for a few thousand years, right? Look, the flowers and fruits in the grasslands and forest are all divine herbs and fruits. Unfortunately, the heaven punishers and those space pirates have already ransacked this place. The flowers and fruits in the grasslands and forest are the leftovers they collected. Their quality and effects are lower. The truly rare herbs and divine items have probably been taken by them. Everyone observed the situation around them and discussed angrily. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and comforted everyone. Don't worry, the divine items that the East conquering marshal and the space pirates have taken will be spat out soon. With that, he led by Long, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the four divine beasts toward the mountain range in the distance. The group flew over the grasslands. They had just flown a few hundred miles and an angry roar filled with murderous intent came from the side. Who dares to trespass into the forbidden area? You must be tired of living. Ji Tianqing and the others turned their heads and saw 5 heaven punishers in golden armor leading more than 400 black-armored warriors flying toward them at lightning speed. 4 of the heaven punishers were only LV4 or LV5 martial gods. Apparently, they were captains. The leader of the gold-armored martial gods had reached LV9 martial god realm. He was most likely the general of the fleet. Swoosh! Swoosh! After a few breaths, the 5 gold-armored martial gods had arrived. The leader of the gold-armored martial gods waved his hand and more than 400 black-armored warriors surrounded Ji Tianqing and the others. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and the others were not angry or worried. Instead, they smiled playfully. It seems that the East conquering marshal has already taken over this grotto and sent people to search for divine items. Bai Long sneered with a mocking expression. Ji Tianqing said calmly, "Spare the gold-armored martial god and kill the others." Bai Long immediately nodded and said, "Yes, sir." Then, his body shone with white light and turned into a 1,000-foot-long white dragon shadow that charged toward the crowd. Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts also attacked. They performed their super skills and attacked the surrounding soldiers. The 5 heaven punishers were stunned. Their faces were filled with astonishment. They had wanted to interrogate Ji Tianqing and the others about how they had broken into this grotto. However, they had not expected that they would dare to attack first when they were so few in number and surrounded. They were simply courting death. Furious, the 5 heaven punishers took out their sabers, swords, and halberds and performed their super skills to counterattack. In the next moment, a great battle broke out. Ji Tianqing and the others performed their super skills and killed more than 100 black-armored warriors in an instant. The 5 heaven punishers' faces changed drastically and their eyes widened in shock. Chapter 2674. When the 5 heaven-seeking martial gods came back to their senses, Ji Tianqing and the others unleashed another wave of divine light. Swish! Swish! The 5 heaven-conquering martial gods sensed the destructive power. Their expressions changed drastically as they dodged and blocked the attack in fear. Boom! Boom! Boom. 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 Divine skills clashed with the five-colored light. A series of earth-shattering booms echoed in the sky. The battle only lasted for a few breaths before it ended. The ground within 300 miles had been turned into ruins. Only a giant pit was left. The four captains were smashed into pieces, killed by Ji Tianqing, Bai Long, and the others. The general in golden armor had also been severely injured. He lay in the ruins, covered in blood and twitching. Swish! With a flash, Bai Long landed in the ruins. He waved his hand and shot out a beam of white light to seal the general in golden armor. He carried the general in golden armor, who had lost an arm and a leg, and flew back to Ji Tianqing. Master, I did as you asked. I kept him alive. Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand. Bai Long retreated to the side. He didn't waste time. He didn't even interrogate the general in golden armor. He used the soul-searching divine skill and started to search the general in golden armor's memory. The Heaven Punishers were very special. Their bodies and strength were very strong, and their vitality was very strong. In terms of combat power and vitality, they were stronger than the demons and more difficult to deal with. However, because of their race, they didn't cultivate divine soul power. Therefore, the divine soul power of the Heaven Punishers was very ordinary. Ji Tianqing easily obtained the general in golden armor's memory. A moment later, he withdrew his palms that were flickering with golden light, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. The general in golden armor's divine soul had been forcefully extracted. He fainted on the spot. Bai Long used his eyes to ask for permission from Ji Tianqing. After getting permission, he killed the general in golden armor. Boom! The general in golden armor was smashed into pieces. He turned into a rain of blood and fell on the ruins. Follow me. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and led everyone to the east. Everyone flew across the sky as fast as lightning, crossing over the green grassland, mountain range, and two mirror-like lakes. Ji Wuxuang couldn't hold back the doubts in his heart. He looked at Ji Tianqing a few times and finally couldn't help but ask, "Father, where are we going?" "You already know the location of the Eastern Marshal." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Marshal Zhendong is leading over 100 captains to search for divine items and resources in the godly palace in the middle of the grotto heaven 30,000 miles away. In addition, there are more than 50 captains leading more than 10,000 soldiers to search for divine items in this grotto heaven." Ji Wuxuang, Ji Wuhan, and Bai Long immediately revealed astonished expressions. The East conquering marshal actually brought so many Heaven Punishers with him. With so many Heaven Punishers, it's enough to occupy the entire grotto heaven. If we go directly to the East conquering marshal and fight them head-on, I'm afraid we'll be at a disadvantage. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "When the East conquering marshal entered the divine planet, he gathered a total of more than 260 captains and more than 20,000 soldiers. There were more than 60 captains leading 6,000 soldiers of the heavenly expedition who were still searching for treasures on the divine planet. When they entered this grotto heaven, the East conquering marshal brought 200 captains and 20,000 soldiers. However, there were 2 pirate groups and 8 adventurer groups that had entered the grotto heaven earlier than them. The East conquering marshal wanted to monopolize this grotto heaven, so he annihilated the 2 pirate groups and the 8 adventurer groups. During the battle, more than 50 captains and more than 6,000 soldiers were killed by the space pirates and adventurers." Ji Wuhan frowned and said with a grave expression, "Father, even so, there are still more than 150 captains and more than 10,000 soldiers in this grotto heaven. We can't fight the East conquering marshal head-on. We can only think of ways to kill them in batches." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right. Father has the same idea." And now, it was the best opportunity. In the temple in the middle of the grotto heaven, there is an ancient divine beast guarding the temple and an old man in a black robe. The old man and the divine beast are both celestial god realm deities. However, they are seriously injured and their strength has dropped greatly, but they are still stubbornly resisting. The East conquering marshal and hundreds of captains are besieging the old man and the divine beast. They have already spent a month, but they still haven't succeeded in killing them. Suddenly hearing this news, everyone's eyes lit up, revealing a look of surprise and anticipation. The divine planet is broken. Half of the planet has turned into ruins. Even the corpses of the deities can't be found. There are still deities and divine beasts in this grotto heaven that survived. Celestial god realm deities and divine beasts. Even if they are seriously injured, their strength is still terrifying. The East conquering marshal is in trouble. This is indeed an excellent opportunity for us. Let's hurry over and help as soon as possible. We can definitely kill the East conquering marshal with a pincer attack. 45 minutes later, the group flew for 30,000 miles and arrived in the middle of a vast and majestic mountain range. There were tall mountains in all directions, and the mountain ranges crisscrossed. It was a vast and majestic scene. The mountain range was filled with divine power, and all the peaks were enveloped by five-colored divine light. The endless mountain range was filled with all kinds of exotic flowers and herbs. They were all divine-level resources and treasures. In the middle of the mountain range, there was a giant mountain that was 30,000 feet tall and 800 miles wide. It stood between the heavens and the earth. The mountain's aura was majestic, and it connected the heavens and the earth. Half of the mountain was enveloped by five-colored divine light, and it was exceptionally sacred and dazzling. Everyone could tell at a glance that this sacred mountain was the core of the grotto heaven. At the same time, it was also where the divine range within 100,000 miles was located. It was a treasure land with the most divine power. However, the giant mountain had been ravaged by the battle of the deities, and cracks had already appeared on the mountain. The mountain's waist had collapsed, and countless rocks and stones were piled up at the foot of the mountain. The group stood above the giant mountain. Their vision was blocked by the five-colored divine light, and they could not see the mountain's peak clearly. However, there were still rumbling noises mixed with the shouts of the heaven punishers echoing in the air. There were also earth-shattering roars of beasts, loud bangs of divine techniques clashing, and explosions. The violent shockwaves formed many five-colored hurricanes that spread in all directions. Even so, the shockwaves could not blow away the five-colored divine light around the mountain. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, it was a scene of colorful splendor. Such a huge battle proved that Ji Tianqing's words were true. The East conquering marshal and hundreds of heaven punishers were still besieging the deity elder and the guardian divine beast. Since the battle between the two sides had not ended, it was easy to handle. Everyone hurriedly released their divine senses. They penetrated the thick five-colored divine light and probed the towering mountain's peak. Soon, everyone saw the situation at the mountain's peak and the situation of the battle. Chapter 2675. The mountain peak within a radius of 300 miles looked as if it had been sliced by a knife. It was very flat. In the middle was a magnificent, majestic, and dignified palace. More than 100 palaces of different sizes formed an incomparably sacred heavenly eagle shrine. Even though the palace was protected by a divine array within a radius of 100 miles. However, the enormous divine light shield had long been riddled with cracks and holes. That was a heavenly god-level array. It was definitely not something that Marshal Zhendong and the others could break through. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that it was caused by the collapse of the divine star. Within the divine light shield, hundreds of palaces were dimmed. Most of them had collapsed, leaving behind many broken walls. Only the most magnificent and majestic main palace in the middle was relatively well preserved. In front of the palace was a huge square with a radius of 100 miles. The square was paved with golden bricks and decorated with billions of silver star stones. The ground was covered with gold and silver. It was majestic. Such a spacious square was enough for hundreds of thousands of believers to kneel and worship at the same time. However, the battle that had lasted for more than a month had already destroyed the square. The ground was shattered, leaving behind dozens of huge holes. The gold and silver bricks had turned into debris and were scattered in the ruins. In the middle of the square stood a golden statue that was 10,000 feet tall. The huge statue was carved of deity King Heavenly Eagle. However, the statue had long been shattered into pieces. It had turned into golden gravel and was buried in the ruins with the soil. As for the back of the palace, it was a garden built by the deities. Countless rare flowers and herbs were planted there. However, when the divine star had collapsed, the palace had also been attacked and affected by the flames of war. The 4 beautiful gardens had also turned into ruins. All kinds of rare and beautiful flowers and divine trees had been destroyed or burned to ashes. Only broken flowers and withered leaves were left on the ground. They mixed with the ashes and soil, telling the story of endless desolation and destruction. At the same time, the battle was still ongoing. More than 100 heaven-slaying martial gods in golden armor were scattered around the godly palace, forming a huge encirclement. They were arranged according to the position of the array. They worked together to form a battle array. They advanced and retreated together. Even though they were only at the martial god realm, the power of the divine skill they cast together was comparable to 3 or 4 peak true god realm experts. In the air above the square, there was a tall man wearing black armor and a golden cape. The purple-colored man who looked like a lion man had the strength of a 6th-level true god. He had a head full of curly purple hair, and he held 2 3-meter-long divine sabers in his hands. He cast spells in an awe-inspiring manner and commanded the 100 martial gods to attack. Without a doubt, he was the leader of the Eastern Expedition Fleet, the overlord of the Green Sun Galaxy, the Eastern Expedition Marshal. Under his command, the hundreds of golden-armored captains were in high spirits. Everyone attacked from time to time, releasing purple light pillars that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, blasting towards the divine palace within the divine light barrier. From time to time, they would join hands to defend, using all kinds of light pillars and barriers to resist the counterattacks of the divine beasts and deities. Everyone had an abundance of resources and could continuously replenish their divine power. Even though the battle had been going on for more than a month, the captains did not seem tired or slack off. The old deity hiding in the divine palace and the huge guardian divine beast were at the end of their rope. They were severely injured. The guardian divine beast was more than 300 feet tall. It was a dark golden divine elephant. However, its appearance was different from an ordinary elephant. Not only did it have 6 thick legs, but it also had 4 long and sharp tusks. Moreover, its body was covered in armor that looked like dragon scales, and it had 4 wide wings under its ribs. Even though its strength had reached the heavenly god realm, it was severely injured. However, its injuries were too severe. Not only were 3 of its legs broken, 2 of its wings were shattered, and even 3 of its 4 tusks were broken. Its body, which was as large as a mountain, was also covered in bloody grooves and holes, revealing its golden divine bones. The huge eye had also turned into an empty bloody hole. The eyeball had disappeared. Its body was on the verge of collapse, and its divine power was extremely weak. Its divine soul was also in a mess. It could not hold on any longer and fall unconscious. Even so, it still stubbornly held on. It opened its bloody mouth, waved its huge trunk, and lifted its mountain-like feet. It released golden divine light and attacked the deities around it. In the face of everyone's light beams and divine spells, it did its best to defend. When it could not dodge the attacks, it used its mountain-like body to block them. What angered and frustrated it the most was that the attacks of the deities never stopped. It did not have time to heal its injuries or recover its divine power. Ji Tianqing could see that this divine elephant was not a pure-blooded ancient divine elephant. It should be a subspecies of the divine elephant, so its talent and power were limited. Simply put, it could be the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant and other divine beasts. What a pity. If it was a pure-blooded ancient divine elephant, not only would it have endless divine power, but its defense would also be almost invincible. Even if it was severely injured and weakened, the deities would not be able to defeat it. Ji Tianqing looked calmly at the dark golden divine elephant and sighed regretfully. However, he also knew that there were very few pure-blooded ancient divine elephants. Even when he was in the god realm, he had only seen a few. They were as rare as divine dragons, phoenixes, and cheilants. Moreover, as time passed, there would be fewer and fewer divine beasts until they disappeared completely. This was very common in the countless years since the ancient times. Many divine beasts and mutated beasts that had existed since the ancient times had disappeared in the river of time. At this moment, more than 100 deities attacked together. They released hundreds of purple light pillars and sword radiances toward the dark golden divine elephant. The light pillars and sword radiances passed through the cracks and holes in the divine light shield and drowned the dark golden divine elephant. The dark golden divine elephant hurriedly used spells to defend itself. It released dozens of golden light shields to protect itself. On its broad and sturdy back stood an old man with white hair and a beard and a black robe. Although the elder was old, his body was tall and straight. His face was still fair and handsome. He had a pair of blue eyes, a pair of elf-like pointy ears, and a whirlpool-like mark on his forehead. Ji Tianqing, of course, recognized that the elder in the black robe was from the Ling clan. In the vast god realm, the Ling clan was one of the most common and most populous clans. The Ling clan was born with a Dharma body. Their bodies were transparent and free of impurities. They were most compatible with spiritual qi, Dharma power, and divine power. Moreover, the Ling clan's bodies were slender and strong. They were elegant and noble, and their faces were delicate and delicate. In the eyes of most clans, the Ling clan members were all handsome and beautiful. There were no ugly people. At the same time, the Ling clan was best at setting up formations and casting spells. Close combat was their weakness. Chapter 2676. The spiritual race elder's injuries were also terrible. His black robe was already in tatters, and his long blue hair was curled into a ball. His left arm had been cut off, and blood flowed from the wound, revealing the dark blue divine bone. His left calf was also gone, and there was nothing under his black robe. His chest, back, and shoulders were covered in wounds and bloody holes. His internal organs and bones were clearly visible. Most of the wounds were old. Only a few wounds had been added in the past month. Ji Tianqing could roughly guess. When the divine star had collapsed, the spiritual race elder and the dark gold divine elephant had been on the verge of death. They had luckily managed to survive. They were hiding in the blessed enclave, hiding in the divine palace and living an ignoble existence. If they had been given a few hundred years, they would have been able to use the divine items and resources in the grotto heaven to heal their injuries and return to their peak strength. Unfortunately, a large group of adventurers, pirates, and the heaven punishers had charged in not long after they had secluded themselves to heal. In the end, this was the result. The spiritual race elder and the dark gold divine elephant were trapped in the temple. They could only endure the attacks of the heaven punishers and could not escape. Boom! 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 The divine arts of the spiritual race elder and the dark gold divine elephant clashed with the purple light in the sky, creating deafening booms. A destructive shockwave exploded within the divine light shield and spread out in all directions. More than half of the palaces that had cracks on them were swaying left and right from the impact. The spiritual race elder and the dark gold divine elephant's injuries had worsened, and they were even weaker now. However, the heaven punishers around the temple were unharmed and still full of divine power. They worked together to cast a spell and prepare for the next attack. Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang all had worried expressions. The four divine beasts also had grave expressions as they used their divine senses to observe the battle on the mountain peak. Seeing the situation of the spiritual race elder and the dark gold divine elephant, Ji Wushuang could not bear to see them in such a state. He asked, "Father, when should we attack? If we delay any longer, I'm afraid that spiritual race elder and that divine elephant will die very soon." Ji Tianqing slightly nodded and said, "Now is the best time to strike. But you must remember that you must not linger in the fight, lest you get surrounded. Only when we seize the initiative can we nibble away at the martial gods under Martial Zhendong." Everyone spread out and attacked. First, they would hold back the heaven punishers. Then, they would find a chance to save the spirit clan elder and the divine elephant. Chen and Yaya followed me to attack from the front, while Bai Long steered the warship to attack from the east. Xian Yu and Lu Li are in charge of the west, Black Dragon and Lan Kuan are in charge of the north. Ji Tianqing quickly arranged everything. Everyone replied in unison and began to move. White Dragon piloted the Tianqing battleship and flew to the east of the temple. He opened up the divine cannons and began firing. Boom 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 boom. More than 100 black divine cannons fired golden light beams that covered the sky and the earth, pouring down on martial god Fa who was near the godly palace. Xian Yu and the glazed fiery dragon flew to the west side of the godly palace and unleashed icy light and golden flames that engulfed more than 20 martial gods. Black Dragon and Blue Kuan flew to the north side of the godly palace and unleashed black water and divine light to attack as well. Ji Tianqing led Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang to attack Martial Zhendong and the martial gods head-on with the Source Stone Divine Sword. An earth-shattering battle immediately broke out. Martial Zhendong had sensed that something was wrong when everyone had reached the peak of the mountain. He had sensed everyone's energy. When Ji Tianqing, the other three and the four divine beasts attacked separately, Martial Zhendong was very alert and gave the order. Half of the martial gods turned around and unleashed divine spells to attack the four divine beasts and Ji Tianqing. The other half continued to attack the spiritual race elder and the divine elephant in the temple. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ji Tianqing and his two sons had just flown to the sky above the square when dozens of purple sword shadows came at them. The three of them were enveloped and the space within 100 miles was sealed. It was difficult for them to dodge. However, they had no intention of dodging. They swung their divine swords confidently and used their ultimate sword techniques. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In an instant, more than 60 dazzling sword shadows slashed at the purple divine light. With a series of loud noises, the sky full of sword shadows collapsed. The shockwave spread out in all directions along with countless pieces of divine light. The martial gods quickly dodged. Martial Zhendong was very powerful. He stood in the sky without moving and was not affected at all. Ji Tianqing and his sons were also unharmed and did not retreat at all. Seeing this, Martial Zhendong immediately frowned. A glint of surprise flashed across his eyes. He stared at the three of them coldly. After sizing up Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang, he fixed his eyes on Ji Tianqing. After a moment of careful observation, his expression suddenly changed. His eyes shone brightly. You are Ji Tianqing." Martial Zhendong's tone was uncertain. It was also filled with shock and surprise. Many years ago, the great Emperor of Heaven Punishing had issued an order to many marshals and generals. Anyone from the Heaven Punishing tribe who encountered Ji Tianqing was to report to them immediately and try to kill him. Whoever could kill Ji Tianqing would be promoted to Duke Shandong and be rewarded with a Heaven God weapon and a Heaven God cultivation technique. At the end of the decree, there was also a portrait. The person in the portrait was a handsome young man in a white robe, with a head full of black hair. His eyes were as bright as stars. His face was extremely handsome and he was in high spirits. The great Emperor of Heaven Punishing's oracle was of great importance. All the marshals and generals who received the oracle would remember the portrait. They did not dare to forget it. Thus, Marshal Zhendong had never seen Ji Tianqing before, but he could recognize him very quickly. However, he had never expected that the infamous, evil, and cruel Ji Tianqing would appear here. On the dilapidated god planet, in a secret blessed land. Marshal Zhendong immediately understood. Ji Tianqing. It's you. It must be you. You entered the Green Sun Galaxy for Benshui. That's why you came here. Marshal Zhendong held the black saber in his right hand and pointed it at Ji Tianqing. His voice was filled with murderous intent. Ji Tianqing did not deny it. He nodded calmly and said, "That's right. It's good that you understand." Marshal Zhendong's eyes grew colder. He licked his lips and said in a low voice, "I heard that you and a divine beast worked together to kill Marshal Zhennan. Benshui can see that you are indeed powerful and capable. However, Benshui is not as useless as Zhennan. He died in the small purple cloud galaxy and became the laughing stock of our tribe. Today, Benshui has gathered a large number of troops here. How dare you come here? You're digging your own grave." As he spoke, Marshal Zhendong sneered. "You probably don't know that our great emperor has given the oracle. If anyone could kill you, they would be able to achieve a meteoric rise and soar into the sky, enjoying glory, splendor, wealth, and power. Benshui must thank you for bringing this great merit to Benshui." Chapter 2677. Marshal Dong had cultivated for 6,000 years to reach his current level of strength. He had spent his entire life fighting for the heaven-slaying tribe to expand their territory and reach his current status. Ever since he had reached LV6 True God Realm, he had not broken through for 700 years. He knew that without a great opportunity, it would be difficult for him to increase his strength in the future. As for ascending to the upper realm and reaching the Heaven God Realm, he did not even dare to think about it. Ji Tianqing, who was standing in front of him, was his greatest opportunity. If he could kill Su Mo, he would be able to obtain great wealth. He would even have the chance to increase his strength and reach the Heaven God Realm. Marshal Dong felt his blood boil at the thought of this. He was so excited that his body trembled. Although he knew that Ji Tianqing was powerful, he was not weak. However, he wasn't a weakling either. He had over 100 heaven-defying martial gods by his side. No matter what, he could easily kill Ji Tianqing. There would be no accidents. Ji Tianqing's eyes were sharp and vicious. How could he not know what Marshal Dong was thinking? He immediately sneered and said in a mocking tone, "It seems that the heaven-slaying great emperor only told you that you could obtain power and wealth by killing me. He did not tell you that I beat him up and he ran away with serious injuries. If you knew about this, you would not be so optimistic." Marshal Dong felt as if he had been struck by lightning when he heard this. He was petrified. He was so shocked that he was dumbfounded. His body stiffened as he stared at Ji Tianqing. After a while, he came to his senses and shouted instinctively, "T. Ji Tianqing, don't you dare deceive us with your lies. Who do you think our great emperor is? He has reached the limit of the true God realm and is a half-step heaven god. He is invincible in the universe. You are just a lowly human. How dare you compare yourself to our great emperor? Today, Benshui will kill you on the spot and expose your ridiculous lies." Marshal Dong naturally hadn't heard of this and didn't believe Ji Tianqing's words. Even if he had some doubts in his heart, he had to show contempt and disdain and deny this matter. Otherwise, great Emperor Tian Fa would be utterly humiliated. While roaring, the East-conquering marshal wielded his pair of blades with a murderous aura, hacking down towards Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! Swish! The dazzling purple blade of light locked onto Ji Tianqing's divine sense and slashed toward him with the power to split heaven and earth. He couldn't dodge, so he could only try to block or neutralize it. Between heaven and earth, a murderous aura suddenly surged, and purple light filled the sky. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, looked indifferent. He casually swung the burial of heaven. Shwa! A dazzling golden sword projection over 10,000 feet in length swept through the air with boundless divine might before striking the two purple light blades head-on. With two loud bangs, the two purple light blades collapsed on the spot, turning into fragments that scattered all over the sky. However, the golden sword light was still intact, and its power did not decrease as it slashed towards Marshal Zhendong. Marshal Zhendong's face suddenly changed. His eyes flashed with a strong sense of surprise, and he subconsciously waved his two swords to slash. Bang! With a muffled sound, the dazzling golden sword light was shattered, and golden fragments scattered all over the sky. However, Marshal Zhendong was knocked back by the impact. He tumbled and crashed into the crowd 10 miles away. More than a dozen martial gods exclaimed as they hurried over to catch Marshal Zhendong. Bang! Bang! The violent impact caused everyone to be thrown off their feet and thrown off their feet. Marshal Zhendong didn't even have time to tidy up his clothes. He roared angrily, "You bastards, what are you waiting for? Kill him for Benshui." The dozen martial gods came back to their senses and answered in unison. They swung their swords at Ji Tianqing. At the same time, Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang also swung their divine swords and slashed out overwhelming sword light. One sword light chills 19 states. Moonless mystic light sword. It was as if a beam of sword light had come from the sky. It carried a brilliant divine might and slashed into the crowd with a force that could split open the sky. Ji Wushuang unleashed 18 crescent-shaped sword lights that enveloped more than a dozen martial gods. Her movements were light and elegant, and the sword light was gorgeous. It was quite pleasing to the eye. However, the sword technique was extremely powerful. After a series of muffled noises, the dozen or so martial gods were knocked back. A few of them were not injured, but the other dozen martial gods were in trouble. Not only were their armors cracked, but there were also hideous wounds on their bodies. Purple blood spurted out. Some of them were in the worst condition. Their limbs were chopped off. Two of the martial gods were standing at the front. They were chopped into pieces by the sword light and died on the spot. Marshal Zhendong's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He was both furious and shocked. He simply couldn't believe it. It was one thing for Ji Tianqing to be so powerful, but even the two children beside him had such terrifying combat strength. At this moment, he finally understood why Ji Tianqing dared to come here. Marshal Zhendong's confidence started to crumble. A hint of worry appeared in his heart. He had a bad premonition. It was hard to predict the outcome of this battle. However, at this point, he would not be afraid or back down. He swung his two swords again and charged at Ji Tianqing. Sky-shattering strike. Marshal Zhendong shouted angrily. He swung his two swords and unleashed hundreds of purple light beams that charged at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing put his left hand behind his back. He swung the burial of heaven's sword with his right hand and counterattacked calmly. Sun-shattering sword. The burial of heaven's sword stabbed out 36 times in an instant and hit the hundreds of purple light beams. Crack, crack, crack. In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of purple light beams collapsed. There were still 24 golden sword lights left, but they were still powerful. They enveloped Marshal Zhendong. Bang, bang, bang. With a series of muffled sounds, Marshal Zhendong was hit 24 times. He screamed and flew back. The black armor and golden cloak he was wearing had been torn apart by the sword light. A dozen bone-deep wounds were left on his dark purple body. Blood gushed out. Marshal Zhendong flew back for more than 10 miles and crashed into the crowd. The few captains in golden armor who were casting spells to attack the spirit tribe elder and the divine elephant immediately staggered and cried out in surprise. Marshal Zhendong was extremely embarrassed and angry. He hurriedly got up and rushed towards Ji Tianqing without thinking about his own safety. This was the second time he was sent flying. Nothing could be done more than 3 times. This time, he used all his strength and his trump card. He would not be defeated by Ji Tianqing again. World slaughter. The East conquering marshal roared. He held 2 long swords with both hands and slashed down at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stood still and punched with his left hand. Dragon Elephant Fist. A mountain-sized dragon elephant fist shadow blasted out with terrifying divine might. Boom! With a muffled sound, Marshal Zhengdong was sent flying again. Before he landed in the crowd, Ji Tianqing swung the Burial of Heaven sword with his right hand and stabbed out a dazzling cold light. Whoosh! The cold light flashed in the sky. The next moment, the cold light appeared more than 10 miles away and exploded on Marshal Zhengdong's chest. Chapter 2678. Boom! There was a muffled explosion. The armor worn by Marshal Zhengdong was blown to pieces, turning into thousands of pieces and splashing everywhere. A huge bloody hole was blown out of his chest, and a large chunk of flesh and bones mixed with blood flew out. His internal organs were all minced and blasted by the sword light. Marshal Dong didn't die even though his body was severely injured. He let out a piercing scream. Ah! His body twitched in pain. His murderous intent turned into crimson flames that soared into the sky. Ji Tianqing. Ben Shui and you are irreconcilable. Marshal Dong roared hysterically. His voice was trembling, hoarse, and filled with grief and anger. Even though he was furious, he didn't lose his mind. He immediately ordered the martial gods next to him, Ben Shui, stop. Attack Ji Tianqing with all your strength. No matter the cost, we must kill him. More than a dozen martial gods were working together to attack the spiritual tribe elder and the divine elephant in the temple. After receiving Marshal Zhengdong's order, they all turned around and charged towards Ji Tianqing without fear of death. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing was surrounded by many golden-armored captains. Not far away, Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang were also surrounded by more than a dozen golden-armored captains. Marshal Dong took the opportunity to take out his battleship. He entered the true god-level battleship and started to bombard Ji Tianqing. The 2 sides fought in the sky, releasing godly light that covered the sky and formed brilliant shadows. It was difficult to determine the winner in a short time. However, the spiritual elder and the divine elephant in the temple were under less pressure. Only 30 or so martial gods were still able to attack them. The remaining 60 or so people were besieging and resisting Ji Tianqing's group, as well as the 4 divine beasts. Someone came to save us. The divine elephant said to the spiritual elder while blocking the attacks of the captains. The old man from the spirit tribe methodically launched a counterattack and replied, we are citizens of the divine realm and this is the mortal world. Why would anyone come to save us? It was just a battle of interests, a dogfight. But no matter what, this is good news for us. Even though the statue and the spirit clan elder were like arrows at the end of their flight, they were like lamps that had run out of oil. However, they remained calm and collected. They were neither angry nor surprised. The divine elephant tried to attack, trying to break through the encirclement of the many martial gods and escape from the godly palace. Unfortunately, its injuries were too severe, and it was already powerless. He tried 3 times in a row, but all of them ended in failure. He was beaten back by the heaven-seeking martial gods. Originally, this was a good opportunity. Unfortunately, we can no longer escape. The divine elephant transmitted his voice, sounding a little helpless and regretful. The old man from the spirit race said calmly, His Excellency the Divine King has long since fallen, and the Divine Star has also been destroyed. We should have died in that war with the other god kings a long time ago. To be able to survive until now was already a blessing from the heavens. Since he couldn't escape, he might as well accept his death. However, we are heavenly gods. How can we die for nothing? The divine elephant and the old man from the spirit race had been together for tens of thousands of years. They had a tacit understanding of each other. It immediately understood what the old man from the spirit race meant. It nodded and said, "If that is the case, then let's drag more people down with us. At least we won't be lonely on the road to hell." The old man from the spirit race nodded and didn't say anything else. He started to wave his hands to cast spells. His body was covered in golden flames, which were as dazzling as a torch. The divine elephant silently endured the attacks of the heaven-seeking martial gods. It also used its last trump card, which gave off dazzling divine light. Whoosh! Destructive ripples of divine power exploded from the bodies of the old man from the spirit race and the divine elephant, shaking the world. Their bodies swelled violently, and a divine might that could destroy the heavens and earth was brewing in their bodies. 100 miles away, Ji Tianqing was fighting fiercely with the East-conquering marshal. Suddenly, he sensed the ripples of divine power in the godly palace. He immediately frowned, and a solemn look flashed past his eyes. Self-destruct? They clearly had a chance to survive, and I was about to save them. Why did they self-destruct? Ji Tianqing knew very well. Even if the old man from the spirit race and the divine elephant were exhausted, the power of their self-destruction wouldn't be too strong. However, they were heavenly gods after all. They had already formed divine Tao laws and created godhoods. The power of their godhoods exploding could destroy everything within a few thousand miles. All living beings below the heavenly god realm could be killed. Unless, they could get away from the center of the explosion. It was getting better and better. When this thought flashed past his mind, Ji Tianqing retreated without hesitation, ignoring the pursuit of the East-conquering marshal. Whoosh! He moved 50 miles in a flash and rushed into the crowd. He pulled Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang and teleported away. At the same time, he didn't forget to use his divine sense to inform Bai Long, Xianyu, Black Dragon, Lu Li, and Lan Kuan. Bai Long and the 4 divine beasts also stopped fighting and retreated as fast as they could after receiving the news. The heaven-seeking martial gods, who were fighting fiercely with them, were shocked. They didn't understand what was going on. Even the East-conquering marshal was confused. He couldn't help but mutter, "Ji Tianqing, that bastard. He clearly has the upper hand. Why did he suddenly run away?" Indeed. In the battle just now, Ji Tianqing and his 2 sons had killed more than 20 golden-armored captains. Now, there were only a dozen golden-armored captains next to the East-conquering marshal, and they were all badly injured. Even the East-conquering marshal was badly injured. Not only did he have a huge bloody hole in his chest, but his legs were also cut off. The wound on his waist almost cut him in half. Of course, the East-conquering marshal wasn't stupid. He immediately realized that there must be a reason why Ji Tianqing suddenly ran away when he had the upper hand. He immediately turned around and looked inside the divine light shield. His eyes locked onto the divine elephant and the black-robed elder of the spiritual tribe in the ruins of the temple. He saw that the mountain-like divine elephant had expanded by 3 times. Its body was shining with golden light. The black-robed elder's body also expanded. Golden flames were burning all over his body. Their auras were extremely violent and chaotic. They were on the verge of exploding. However, the 30 heaven-seeking martial gods didn't know what was going on. Without the East-conquering marshal's order, they didn't dare to stop attacking. They were still attacking the spiritual tribe elder and the divine elephant. Seeing this, the East-conquering marshal's expression changed drastically. His body stiffened. He instantly realized that the spiritual tribe elder and the divine elephant were going to self-destruct. It's over. The East-conquering marshal's eyes were filled with grief, anger, and despair. Damn Ji Tianqing! You lowly bastard! If you hadn't interfered, that divine beast and the black-robed elder wouldn't have had the chance to self-destruct. Unfortunately, it had come to this. No matter how angry the East conquering marshal was, there was nothing he could do. Retreat! Everyone, retreat at once! He roared at the top of his lungs. At the same time, he used his fastest speed to teleport and escape into the distance. However, as soon as he fled 100 miles away, an earth-shattering explosion erupted from the divine palace, reverberating throughout the universe. Chapter 2679. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion reverberated through the entire grotto heaven and blessed land. The spiritual tribe elder and the divine elephant self-destructed at the same time. Their bodies instantly disappeared and turned into boundless golden divine light that spread in all directions. The dazzling golden divine light had the power to destroy the world. In an instant, the temple within a 100-mile radius was flattened to the ground. The palaces, buildings, and high walls were all turned to dust. Only a giant pit was left on the spot, along with countless rocks and dust. The divine light shield, which was already in tatters, also dissipated in an instant. Then, a golden divine light that could destroy heaven and earth engulfed the entire mountain peak like flames. Everything within a few hundred miles was drowned by the divine light. The first to be annihilated were the dozens of gold-armored captains who couldn't escape in time. Even though they were full of divine power, had divine armors, and used shields to block the golden divine light. But it was useless. Under the golden divine light, the dozens of gold-armored captains were crushed on the spot and turned into dust. Then, the golden divine light caught up with Marshal Dong, who was fleeing in panic. Swoosh! The divine light swept past. His body, which was full of wounds and bloody holes, quickly melted like snow under the hot sun. After all, he was only at the 6th level of the true immortal realm and had been severely injured by Ji Tianqing, so he was weak. Also, he was only 100 miles away from the center of the explosion, so he had to withstand a lot of power. In the blink of an eye, he completely disappeared without a trace. Marshal Dong had never thought that he would die on this broken star after fighting in the universe all his life. Moreover, he had died in such an obscure way, ending his rather glorious life. The next moment, the golden divine light spread for 500 miles, past the mountain peak, and rushed into the sky. Lan Kuan had only escaped 600 miles when it was engulfed by the golden divine light. Swoosh! As the golden divine light swept past, countless cracks appeared on its body, and blood spurted out, revealing its white bones. The incomparably powerful divine power knocked it unconscious, and it fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. Then, Qianyu, the black dragon, and the glazed fire dragon who had escaped 700 miles away were also engulfed by the golden divine light. When the golden divine light reached this place, its power had already weakened somewhat. The 3 divine beasts were severely injured and fell to the ground with blood all over their bodies. However, they were still able to maintain their consciousness and did not fall unconscious. White Dragon, who had escaped 800 miles away, was protected by Tianqing's battleship. Even though it was engulfed by the golden divine light, the Tianqing battleship was unscathed, and so was the White Dragon. Only after Ji Tianqing had fled 1,000 miles away with the 2 children did the golden divine light catch up to them. He was already prepared and brought the 2 children into the sword world. Shwa! The golden divine light swept across and struck the Burial of Heaven sword, blasting the Burial of Heaven sword several dozen kilometers away. However, the Burial of Heaven sword was made of a special material and was not damaged. Ji Tianqing and his 2 sons were also safe and sound. After a short while, the golden divine light spread to a radius of 4,000 miles before its power was greatly reduced, and it gradually dissipated. This apocalyptic disaster finally came to an end. As far as the eye could see, there was scorched earth and ruins within a radius of 4,000 miles. The towering mountain that was 3,000 feet tall had already collapsed, and endless earth and rocks had collapsed. The surrounding mountains and forests were also in ruins. The storm finally stopped. The Spirit Clan Elder and the Divine Elephant had completely disappeared. Marshal Zhendong and the hundreds of golden-armored captains under his command were also not spared. They were all smashed to pieces. Only Ji Tianqing and the others survived. Shua! Ji Tianqing flew out of the burial of Heaven's sword with the two children and appeared in the sky. He looked around and saw that the four divine beasts were lying on the ground, covered in blood and in a sorry state. He then flew back. White Dragon also drove the battleship to rescue Lan Kuan. After a while, Ji Tianqing, White Dragon, and the others rescued the four divine beasts. Everyone gathered together and quickly checked the four divine beasts' injuries. White Dragon found the results and said worriedly, "Master, Lan Kuan's injuries are the most serious. He's already unconscious. Xian Yu, Black Dragon, and Azure are also seriously injured, but they can still stay awake." Then, he cursed angrily, "That Divine Elephant and the Spirit Clan Elder really don't know what's good for them. We went to rescue them with good intentions, but they didn't want to live. They actually self-destructed. In the end, they caused us to be in such a miserable state." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said regretfully, "That Spirit Clan Elder and the Divine Elephant probably gave up hope long ago. That's why they self-destructed to end all of this." Although Qian Yu, Black Dragon, Lan Kuan, and Azure were all seriously injured. Marshal Zhendong and the hundreds of captains under his command were also killed on the spot. This way, it saved us a lot of trouble. Only then did White Dragon's anger dissipate. He nodded and said, "That's right. If it weren't for the Spirit Clan Elder and the Divine Elephant, we would have to pay a heavy price to kill Marshal Zhendong and the hundreds of captains." Ji Tianqing instructed, "Don't worry. When they return to the Divine Pagoda, they will be able to recover after 100 years of seclusion. Take them into the Sword World first and help them heal their injuries. I want to take Chen Chen and Yaya to kill the other members of the Heaven Punisher." Ji Tianqing never forgot that there were more than 40 captains and more than 10,000 soldiers of the Heaven Punisher in the Blessed Enclave. They were searching everywhere for divine items. The White Dragon also remembered this matter and did not hesitate to say yes. Then, he took the four divine beasts into the Sword World to heal their injuries. Ji Tianqing, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang stayed in the sky above the ruins and waited quietly. Ji Wushuang waited for a while. Feeling puzzled, he couldn't help but ask, "Father, aren't we going to kill the other members of the Heaven Punisher? Why aren't we moving yet?" Before Ji Tianqing could answer, Ji Wuhan explained, "Father wants to wait." Just now, the Spirit Clan Elder and the Divine Elephant self-destructed, destroying everything within a radius of 4,000 miles. That huge explosion spread throughout the entire Blessed Enclave. The huge commotion also alarmed everything within 100,000 miles. Soon, the members of the Heaven Punisher who are searching for treasures outside will rush over to check the situation. Ji Wushuang immediately understood and nodded to show that he understood. Just as expected. Half an hour later, a pitch-black warship of the Heaven Punisher sped over from afar. Whoosh! When the warship flew over the ruins, Ji Tianqing suddenly swung the burial of Heaven's sword and fiercely slashed at it. With a huge boom, the warship was cut in half. Then, Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang attacked at the same time and destroyed the warship that had been cut in half. A golden armor captain and more than 200 soldiers of the Heaven Punisher were also quickly killed by the father and son trio. In just 10 breaths of time, the father and son trio took care of a warship and waited patiently. Soon, 2 more warships flew over from afar. When the warships arrived above the ruins, Ji Tianqing swung his sword again and cut the 2 warships in half. Another massacre was about to begin. Chapter 2680. A total of 8 hours passed. Ji Tianqing and his sons had successively destroyed 42 battleships and killed more than 12,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army. The heaven-conquering army that had been scattered all over the cave and busy searching for resources had basically all rushed over. Even the heaven-conquering battleships that were at the edge of the cave would be able to arrive in 8 hours. The three of them waited for an hour, but there were no battleships coming. Ji Wuxuang asked tentatively, "Father, we've already destroyed 42 battleships. We should have killed them all, right?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and shook his head gently. There should be 5 battleships and more than 1,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army. I don't know why they haven't come yet. Ji Wuhan said thoughtfully, perhaps those people found some precious divine items or secret realms and were delayed. Or perhaps they encountered some danger and couldn't get away for the time being. There's another possibility. They guessed that something had happened here, so they hid in the dark and didn't dare to show themselves. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "These are all possibilities, but we don't have time to continue waiting. Let's split up and search the entire cave." There were only 5 battleships and more than 1,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army left. The strongest among them was only at the 5th or 6th level of the martial god realm. They were not a threat to Ji Wuhan and Ji Wuxuang. Therefore, Ji Tianqing was not worried about the safety of his 2 children. "All right. We will follow father's orders." Ji Wuhan and Ji Wuxuang cupped their fists and bowed. They each held the Source Stone divine sword and turned to leave. One flew to the south and the other flew to the east. The western and northern regions were left to Ji Tianqing alone. Swoosh! 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 The 3 of them started to move, flying across the sky as fast as lightning. Along the way, the 3 of them used their divine consciousness to search the surroundings, not letting go of any clues. An hour later, Ji Tianqing had searched an area of 40,000 miles and discovered something in the mountain range in the northwest. 3 heaven-conquering battleships and more than 500 heaven-conquering army in black armor had formed a huge encirclement in the sky. 19 martial gods of foreign tribes with different appearances and strange attire were trapped in the encirclement. The 2 sides were fighting fiercely in the mountain range. The sky darkened and the sun and moon dimmed. Dazzling divine light constantly bloomed and shone in the sky. A deafening sound reverberated between heaven and earth. Violent and devastating shockwaves crazily crashed into the surrounding mountains and peaks. Many mountains and forests had been destroyed by the aftermath of the battle, turning into desolate ruins. I am dealing with them. They can't do anything to me. Ji Tianqing's eyes narrowed when he saw this message. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Those martial gods of the alien tribes have teamed up with the interstellar pirates. Those damned bastards. If they dare to hurt Yaya, I will make sure they die without a burial place. It was reasonable for the martial gods of the alien tribes and the interstellar pirates to work together and steal treasures from the grotto heaven. Ji Tianqing was not surprised. After all, they were stronger when they worked together and had a chance to steal more divine items. But of all things, they should not have made a move against Ji Wuxuang. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and the 2 children were Ji Tianqing's reverse scale. Anyone who dared to touch them would die without a complete corpse and be reduced to ashes. Ji Tianqing ignored the heaven-conquering army soldiers and the 19 martial gods of the alien tribes. He turned around and flew away without hesitation. He teleported continuously in the sky and rushed to the east as fast as he could. In just 15 minutes, he had traveled more than 40,000 miles. When he flew over a majestic mountain range and was about to reach the vast grassland, he saw a dazzling divine light in the sky ahead. Dazzling multicolored divine spell radiance was accompanied by a series of loud noises. Ji Tianqing quickly sped up and gripped the burial of heaven sword tightly in his right hand. In a moment, he flew over the grassland and arrived near the battlefield. His divine sense penetrated the divine light in the sky and saw the situation clearly. He saw Ji Wushuang, who was wearing an icy blue dress, waving the Source Stone divine sword and fending off the attacks of the 7 martial gods. She was covered in an icy blue divine light and was covered by a divine light shield. Other than her messy hair and sweaty forehead, there were no obvious wounds on her body. On the other hand, the 7 martial gods of the alien tribes and the interstellar pirates were mostly injured. Their clothes were ragged and they were covered in blood. Ji Tianqing knew that Ji Wushuang had been fighting with the martial gods for a long time while he was rushing over to rescue her. The two sides fought for thousands of miles and 4 martial gods had been killed by Ji Wushuang. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and rushed over with his sword. Chapter 2681. Whoosh! 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 The Burial of Heaven swung his sword, and dozens of dazzling golden sword lights bloomed in the sky. The 7 strangely dressed martial gods did not even have time to dodge before they were enveloped by the sword lights. Bang! 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 A series of muffled explosions rang out. Blood splattered in the golden light as cries of agony rang out. Only a one-eyed pirate managed to dodge the fatal sword lights. The remaining 6 martial gods were struck by the sword lights. Their limbs were severed on the spot, and their bodies were even split in half. 4 martial gods were killed instantly. Their body parts fell from the sky and landed on the grassland with a plop. 2 martial gods were severely injured. Their bodies were covered in blood as they retreated in panic. The battle between the two sides temporarily stopped. Ji Wushuang turned her head and looked behind her. When she saw that it was Ji Tianqing, she was instantly pleasantly surprised. "Father! Why are you here?" Ji Tianqing flew to her side and sized her up. When he saw that she was indeed uninjured, he said, "How can I not worry when you're in such a dangerous situation?" A joyful smile appeared on Ji Wushuang's small face. She nodded and said, "I knew that you would definitely come to save me." At this moment, the 2 surviving martial gods of the foreign tribes met up with the one-eyed pirate. The 3 of them looked sharply at Ji Tianqing. When they saw his face, their expressions changed drastically. "Damn it! It's him! That earth-shattering explosion! How can he still be alive? Damn it! How did he get here so quickly?" It was obvious that the martial gods of the foreign tribes and the interstellar pirates knew that an earth-shattering explosion had occurred in the Grotto Heaven. They could guess that the explosion had something to do with Ji Tianqing and the Heaven Punishers. They had thought that Ji Tianqing had been killed by the East Conquering Marshal and the Heaven Punishers and had died tragically in the explosion. That was why they had dared to surround and kill Ji Wushuang when they encountered him. However, they had never thought that Ji Tianqing would still be alive and would rush over as quickly as he could. The 2 martial gods and the interstellar space pirate immediately wore twisted expressions. Their eyes were filled with despair. They had seen Ji Tianqing's divine might and knew that Ji Tianqing was a terrifying true god powerhouse. Now that they had fallen into Ji Tianqing's hands, they had no way out. Ji Tianqing looked at the 3 of them indifferently and said coldly, "Don't wait for me to make a move. Kill yourselves." The 3 of them stiffened and revealed looks of shame and indignation. They were both humiliated and unwilling. The 2 martial gods clenched their teeth and shouted coldly in unison, "Sir, we admit that you are powerful, but you want us to kill ourselves. You are too conceited." Obviously, the 2 of them refused to give up hope and were still hoping to escape. But that one-eyed pirate was very shrewd. He rolled his eyes and came up with an idea. He hurriedly took a few steps forward, and with a face full of fear and trepidation, he knelt down and kowtowed to Ji Tianqing, saying in a sincere tone, "Senior, I know I was wrong. How would I dare to be enemies with your daughter? It's all because of these 2 bastards. They forced me to join forces with them to attack your daughter and take the treasure. Senior, please judge clearly. I am sincerely repentant and am willing to serve you faithfully. I will be at your beck and call and will be absolutely loyal to you. I only ask that you show mercy and spare my lowly life. The ferocious-looking one-eyed pirate had no dignity or backbone at all. He had knelt down and surrendered directly. Moreover, he had even blamed the two martial gods of the foreign tribes. The two martial gods were dumbfounded. They glared at the one-eyed pirate and scolded him. One-eyed pirate. You are slandering us. You are the culprit and you dare to push the blame to us. It was your pirate crew that tried to rope us in and join forces with us. It was also your idea to attack this little girl. The two martial gods pointed at the one-eyed pirate and trembled in anger. They were about to vomit blood. The one-eyed pirate ignored them. He tried his best to put on a pious and respectful appearance and kowtow to Ji Tianqing. Senior, they would rather die than surrender and admit their mistakes. They are the ones who deserve to die. I respect and worship you and am willing to serve you for the rest of my life. The two martial gods were so angry that their faces turned green. They could not suppress their injuries and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Bastard! How can you be so shameless? One-eyed pirate, you are a space pirate. You are a slug with no dignity or backbone. The one-eyed pirate turned a deaf ear to the two's curses. He only looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile. He knew very well that this was the only choice he could make under the current circumstances. If he did not kneel down and surrender and still dared to fight Ji Tianqing, only death would await him. He had to endure the humiliation and save his life first. When Ji Tianqing lowered his guard, he would try to contact the chief or captain. The Falling Star pirate group he belonged to was the strongest pirate group in the Green Sun Galaxy. There were two true god experts among them. As long as the captain brought a large group of people here, they would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing and the others. At that time, not only would he regain his freedom, but he would also make a great contribution and be put in an important position by the captain. However, the one-eyed pirate's fantasy was immediately interrupted. Stop arguing, all of you shut up. Ji Tianqing waved his hand coldly and shouted. He looked at the one-eyed pirate with a sharp gaze and asked expressionlessly, You want to be loyal to me? Be my slave. The one-eyed pirate saw hope and was pleasantly surprised. He nodded without hesitation and said, Yes. Ji Wuxia frowned and whispered to Ji Tianqing, Father, you want to take him as a servant? Isn't this guy too ugly? Ji Tianqing did not answer her. He looked at the one-eyed pirate coldly and said in a mocking tone, You think too highly of yourself. You want to be my slave. You don't have that right. As he spoke, he slowly raised his left hand. All three of you must die. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his left hand and shot out 3 dazzling sword lights. Swish! 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 The sword lights instantly cut through the sky and attacked the one-eyed pirate and the 2 foreign race martial gods. The sword lights locked onto their souls and they had nowhere to hide. They all widened their eyes in fear. The dazzling golden sword lights rapidly enlarged in their eyes. In the next moment. Bam! 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 3 muffled sounds exploded at almost the same time. The one-eyed pirate and the 2 foreign race martial gods were instantly blasted into pieces by the sword lights. Not even their bones were left. Whether they knelt and surrendered or would rather die than submit, they could not escape the fate of death. In front of Ji Tianqing, they did not have the right to play any tricks. Let's go. After the sword lights dispersed, Ji Tianqing turned and flew away with Ji Wuxia, rushing towards the northwest. The two of them had only flown for tens of thousands of miles when Ji Tianqing received another message from Ji Wuhan. Father, I was attacked by 12 foreign race martial gods near a lake in the south. However, Father, please do not worry. I have been fighting with them for a long time and have already killed 7 of them. I am chasing the remaining 5. Chapter 2682. After receiving Ji Wuhan's message, Ji Tianqing knew that he was also in danger. However, Ji Wuhan was strong, calm, and wise. He had already averted the danger. No wonder Chen took so long to reply to me. Ji Tianqing muttered and put away the communication jade slip. Ji Wuxuang asked with concern, "Father, Big Brother is also being attacked. Should we go and save him?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, "No need. Let's go to the northwest. There's still a large group of damned people there." "Father, aren't you afraid that Big Brother will have other thoughts if you're so biased?" Ji Wuxuang blinked her large eyes and muttered softly. Ji Tianqing was amused by her. He extended a finger and tapped her forehead. He said with a smile, "What bias? Your Big Brother is young, but he's calm and wise. He can already hold his own. He killed more than half of the foreign race martial gods that surrounded him. 5 of them escaped. He's chasing after them. He'll meet up with us soon." Ji Wuxuang touched her fair and smooth forehead and said with an embarrassed smile, "Big Brother is still the best." Ji Tianqing did not say anything else. The father and daughter hurried and returned to the mountain range in the northwest half an hour later. The situation was just as Ji Tianqing had expected. The 3 warships and hundreds of heaven-conquering soldiers were still attacking more than a dozen foreign race martial gods. The battle was not over yet. However, the battlefield had shifted 8,000 miles to the north. The number of people on both sides had also decreased. There were originally 19 foreign race martial gods, but now there were only 16 left. Moreover, their injuries were even more severe. The 3 heaven-conquering warships and the 3 gold-armored captains were safe and sound, but the number of heaven-conquering soldiers had decreased by more than 80. Ji Tianqing and his daughter stood in the sky and observed for a moment from nearly 100 miles away. Ji Wuxuang could not help but ask, "Father, should we kill the heaven-conquering soldiers first or the foreign race martial gods first?" Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "Kill them all." So domineering. Ji Tianqing waved her little fists and looked at Ji Tianqing with starry eyes. Ji Tianqing did not say much. He directly raised his palms and released a golden divine light that covered the sky and earth, pouring it onto the battlefield. Swoosh! Swish! In the blink of an eye, the dozens of dazzling golden lights scattered around the battlefield, forming a protective shield that covered an area of 100 miles, sealing off the battlefield. Ji Wuxuang revealed a trace of understanding and asked, "Father, are you going to catch them all in one fell swoop, leaving no fowls or dogs behind?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "If Father were to attack directly, there would be a lot of casualties. Wouldn't those people be scared away? At that time, we'll have to waste time chasing after them." "That makes sense." Ji Wuxuang nodded in agreement. At the same time, the martial gods of the heaven punishers and foreign races inside the sealing formation stopped attacking at the same time. Everyone looked up at the sky and cautiously looked at the golden light seal, searching around for the person who had set up the seal. Under everyone's gazes, Ji Tianqing and Ji Wuxuang appeared grandly. Swoosh! He and Ji Wuxuang flew to the golden light shield and stood still, looking down at the martial gods of the heaven punishers and foreign races. The 3 golden armored captains and many heaven punishers did not recognize Ji Tianqing. They roared angrily and swung their weapons at the golden light shield. When the 16 martial gods of the foreign races saw Ji Tianqing's face, their expressions changed drastically. Some were filled with astonishment, some were bewildered, and there were even some who revealed expressions of joy and anticipation. However, there were also some who had grave expressions and their eyes were filled with worry. "It's him. How is he still alive? That's impossible. The explosion just now could have destroyed the world. It must have something to do with him. The East conquering marshal and many heaven punishers are dead. How can he still be alive? Just how powerful is this person? This person has a blood feud with the heaven punishers. If he kills these heaven punishers, we'll be saved. I'm afraid it's not that simple. He's not related to us. Why would he save us? Why did he set up the seal and seal all of us? Could it be that he wants to kill all of us? More than a dozen martial gods of the foreign races discussed with complicated expressions. They were not in a hurry to attack the golden light shield. Instead, they took the opportunity to retreat. The 3 heaven-punishing battleships and hundreds of heaven punishers attacked the golden light shield with all their might. Boom! Purple light danced in the sky. However, the golden light shield was extremely sturdy. There was not even a crack on it. Ji Tianqing raised his palms expressionlessly and started to control the seal. Swoosh! Under his control, the golden shield shrunk at an extremely fast speed. After a short while, the light shield shrunk from 100 miles to 3,000 feet. More than 400 heaven punishers, 3 gold-armored fleet captains, 3 heaven-punishing battleships, and 16 martial gods of the foreign races were all crowded together. The 3 heaven punishers were as huge as mountains. Now that the light shield had shrunk to such a size, the heaven punishers had no space to move. They could only shrink as well. The 3 fleet captains started to panic. They quickly ordered all the heaven punishers to enter the heaven punishers. At that moment, Ji Tianqing waved his hands and used a secret technique. He shouted softly, "Explode!" As his voice rang out, the golden light ball with a diameter of 3,000 feet suddenly exploded. Boom! Along with an earth-shattering explosion, the golden ball of light exploded with a bang, and golden divine flames that blotted out the sky and covered the earth soared. The 3 heaven-punishing battleships were blown into thousands of pieces and scattered among the ruins. Hundreds of heaven punishers were also blown to pieces and scattered among the mountains. The 16 martial gods of the foreign races and the 3 fleet captains could not escape death. They were blown to pieces and mixed with the dirt and dust. They were buried hundreds of miles away. After a long time, the deafening explosion finally stopped. The golden light in the sky dissipated. The heaven punishers and martial gods of the foreign races no longer existed. Ji Wushuang withdrew her amazed gaze and looked at Ji Tianqing sideways. She said, "Father, I also want to learn this method of killing without spilling blood." She was lively and kind by nature. She was never belligerent and did not like bloody battles. However, this was fate. In order to survive, she had to learn how to fight and kill. However, she still hated the kind of fighting where swords clashed and blood splattered. She could more easily accept the method of controlling supreme divine power and directly destroying the enemy like just now. Ji Tianqing understood his daughter's thoughts. He nodded slightly and said, "This is a true God-level divine power. When you break through to the true God realm, I will teach you." Okay. Ji Wushuang quickly nodded, full of anticipation. Then the father and daughter turned around and left to continue searching in the cave. Not long after, Ji Wuhan also dealt with the enemy and sent a message to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing asked him to continue searching and collect some precious divine items and resources. Ji Wuhan naturally did as he was told. Chapter 2683. 2 days later. Ji Tianqing and his 2 sons left the blessed enclave together. There were countless divine items and cultivation resources in the blessed enclave. However, they only looted a portion of the precious and rare treasures and resources. They were not interested in those divine items and resources that were made of ordinary materials. The treasures and resources that the 3 of them looted were mainly metal ores and medicinal herbs. The medicinal herbs would be used to refine divine elixirs. The metal ores would be put into the sword world to help the earth spirit race increase their strength and improve their smelting methods. The three of them left the blessed enclave and returned to the surface of the divine planet. Ji Tianqing piloted the battleship and started searching the divine planet with Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang. Marshal Zhendong and the 200 captains he had brought with him had died in the blessed enclave. However, there were still more than 60 captains and 6,000 soldiers on the divine planet. They were still searching for resources and hunting down the alien martial gods and space pirates. If they did not kill this group of heaven punishers, it would be a disaster in the future. After all, this group of heaven punishers was large and powerful. No matter which world they invaded, they would be invincible. For the next 2 months, Ji Tianqing had been searching for traces of heaven punishers on the divine planet. At the same time, he looted some precious treasures and resources. During this time, he found more than 50 heaven-punishing battleships. Not only did he destroy those battleships and kill all their captains, but he also killed more than 4,000 soldiers of the heaven punishers. As a result, there was basically no sign of heaven punishers on the surface of the divine planet. However, the number of battleships did not match. There were more than a dozen battleships and more than 1,000 soldiers of the heaven punishers who were missing. Ji Tianqing searched for half a month but did not find anything. He only found some scattered battleships and corpses. He guessed that the battleships and more than 1,000 soldiers of the heaven punishers had either fled the divine planet or been killed by the alien martial gods and space pirates. Since that was the case, he did not waste any more time and left the divine planet. A few days later, Tianqing's battleship left the scattered star seas and returned to the Five Elements world. Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang returned to the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower to cultivate in seclusion. The 4 divine beasts had also entered the divine pagoda and were recuperating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. Ji Tianqing checked the treasures and resources he had plundered from the divine planet. Then, he controlled the Five Elements world and continued to roam the Azure Sun galaxy. Half a month later, the world of 5 elements crossed the dark void and disappeared into the boundless darkness. The shining god star was still floating in the void, slowly aging and weakening. There were still a lot of treasures and resources left on the divine planet, which benefited the martial gods and space pirates of the Green Sun galaxy. If nothing unexpected happened, a large group of martial gods would soon rush to the divine planet to plunder resources. When all the divine treasures and resources on the divine planet were taken away, the divine planet would deteriorate and age faster. Perhaps after a few thousand years, or even tens of thousands of years, half of the divine star would turn into dust and disappear forever. In the blink of an eye, another 2 years had passed. During this time, the 5 Elements world had flown more than 20 billion miles in the void. Ji Tianqing had saved 9 more worlds and killed nearly 300 martial gods and more than 30,000 soldiers. He had also encountered 2 planets that were rich in resources but lifeless. He had used the power of the worlds to devour them. After refining the 2 stars, his strength had reached the peak of perfection, and had increased by 2 times. However, he was still at the peak of the true God realm and could not break through to the heavenly God realm. 2 years had passed in the outside world. The 4 divine beasts had been recuperating in the distorted spacetime for 100 years. Their injuries had all healed. Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang's strength had also broken through to the true God realm. Ji Tianqing did not forget his previous promise to teach Ji Wushuang the star explosion divine technique. Yun Yao and Ji Ku had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. The 5 Elements world had been roaming in the void for more than 10 years, but the 2 of them had been cultivating for 700 years. Their strength had finally caught up to Ji Tianqing and reached the 9th level of the true God realm. Even if they continued to cultivate in seclusion, they would not be able to increase their strength. They could only strengthen their foundation of the divine Tao and make their divine power more powerful and vast. Therefore, the two of them ended their seclusion and accompanied Ji Tianqing to kill the Heaven Punishers and save the various worlds. 3 years later, the Five Elements world had reached the center of the Azure Sun galaxy and was close to the Azure Sun planet. At the same time, the news of the death of Marshal Dong and more than 200 captains had already spread throughout the Azure Sun galaxy. Almost all the Heaven Punishers in the Great Worlds knew about this. The martial gods and generals of the Heaven-slaying sect were filled with anxiety and worry. Fortunately, the East Expedition Fleet still had a deputy marshal guarding the Azure Sun planet. This person's name was Shenyang, and his strength was second only to Marshal Dong. He had reached the 5th level of the True God realm. Normally, the East conquering marshal had a lot of authority, and he controlled the affairs of the entire fleet. Although Shenyang was the deputy marshal in name, he did not have much real power. He was only equivalent to Marshal Dong's assistant and advisor. Ever since Marshal Dong had died, Deputy Marshal Shenyang was not sad. Instead, he was secretly glad. He could finally take the position and control the entire fleet. From today onwards, he would take the position and change his name to Marshal Ruyang. The 3,000 battleships of the East Expedition Fleet, more than 300,000 Heaven Punishers, and more than 400,000 puppet soldiers were all under his control. In just half a month, Admiral Zhuo Yang had pacified the morale of the soldiers under his command and taken over the military affairs of the fleet, taking full control of it. The generals and captains guarding the various worlds were all anxious and worried. They all sent messages to Marshal Ruyang to ask for countermeasures. Marshal Ruyang did not hesitate to give orders to deploy the troops. Those planets that did not have enough resources or had not been conquered were temporarily abandoned. The remaining 200 battleships took more than 20,000 Heaven Punishers and returned to the Azure Sun planet. As a result, there were as many as 360 battleships guarding the Azure Sun planet, and more than 60,000 Heaven Punishers. Marshal Ruyang led many captains to strengthen the Azure Sun planet's divine light shield and added many defense divine arrays to the Heaven Punishing Temple. In just 2 years, the defense of the Azure Sun planet had increased by 3 times. Everyone knew that Marshal Ruyang wanted to defend the Azure Sun planet against Ji Tianqing's sudden attack. After all, Ji Tianqing had come aggressively and his methods were ruthless. He could even kill the Eastern Marshal. How strong was he? Marshal Ruyang guessed that Ji Tianqing would come to the Azure Sun planet. However, there was no way he would run away without a fight. If he did, he would be severely punished by the Heaven Punishers and become the laughingstock of the Heaven Punishers. In the past 2 years, Marshal Ruyang had not only strengthened the defense of the Azure Sun planet and the Heaven Punishing Temple, but he had also deployed the corresponding countermeasures and plans. He had built the Black Sun into an impregnable fortress. The 360 martial gods and 60,000 elite warriors were also united and had high morale. Now, Marshal Ruyang had prepared everything. He was sitting in the Heaven Punishing Temple, waiting for Ji Tianqing to come and die. Chapter 2684. The void was dark, cold, and dead silent. The dazzling golden 5 elements world silently approached the Black Sun, its speed gradually slowing down. Looking at it from billions of miles away, the huge Black Sun hung quietly in the void. The size of this planet was only 30% smaller than the 5 elements world. Among the many stars in the Azure Sun galaxy, this was already the largest star in terms of size. The entire surface of the planet was protected by a thick green light, like a dark green sun. This was how the Black Sun got its name. Around the Black Sun, in the void hundreds of millions of miles away, there were more than a dozen planets of different sizes. Those stars, big or small, were all barren stars without life. They were like loyal guards, guarding the Black Sun firmly. Ji Tianqing, Yin Yao, and Ji Ke stood on the golden light barrier of the 5 elements world and looked at the Black Sun from afar. The Black Sun's position and the surrounding planets are much better than the Purple Cloud planet. If there's a heavenly god-level powerhouse, he can set up powerful divine formations and astral divine cannons on the surrounding 16 planets and turn them into satellites of the Black Sun. Once there's an invasion, the 16 satellites will be able to detect the enemy's movements in advance and launch attacks and interceptions. Yin Yao and Ji Ku both understood that the so-called satellites referred to the guardian planets. Yin Yao nodded slightly in agreement. Ji Ku shook his head with a smile and said, if it's a god from the upper realm, he'll naturally do that. However, this is the mortal world. Under the heavenly axiom, no one can break through to the heavenly god level, so no one can use that kind of divine power. Moreover, even if there's an invasion, there'll only be martial gods and true gods. The Black Sun's divine light barrier alone is enough to stop most true gods. Indeed, whether it was the Black Sun or the Purple Cloud planet, the divine light barrier formed by the heavenly axiom was a heavenly god-level defense. 99% of true gods could not break through the divine light barrier. Only peerless powerhouses like Ji Tianqing and the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher who had special opportunities and techniques could break through the divine light barrier and invade the various planets. Ji Ku's words made Ji Tianqing feel a little emotional. If it weren't for the Heaven Punisher race causing chaos in the 3,000 worlds, we would have ascended to the divine world and become heavenly gods. Only after reaching the heavenly god realm and condensing a godhead could one be considered a true god. At that time, I'll be able to use all kinds of divine abilities. Yin Yao nodded again and said in a low voice, yes. We can ascend and leave. The grudges of this mortal world have nothing to do with us. However, the heaven-destroying race had their eyes on the 5 elements world. They were determined to invade and even destroy it. Our parents, relatives, and friends will also be enslaved by the Heaven Crushers, or even slaughtered. Moreover, the Heaven Punishers had powerful gods supporting them, so they could avoid the laws of heaven and avoid the 9 heavenly tribulations. All signs indicated that the Heaven Punisher race and the god spirit behind them were plotting something. No matter what, we have to destroy the Heaven Punisher race before we can ascend with peace of mind. Seeing the gloomy atmosphere, Ji Ku comforted them. Big brother Tianqing, eldest senior sister, you don't have to worry too much. With our current strength, we are invincible in the galaxy. As long as we sweep through the 3 major star zones and reach the Heaven Punisher planet, it will be the end of the Heaven Punisher race. At most, in a few decades, we will be able to destroy the Heaven Punisher race and successfully ascend to the divine world. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, that's right. That's my plan. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's deal with the Black Sun first. Although we have plundered a large amount of treasures and resources from the divine world and killed Marshal Dong and many other Heaven Punisher martial gods, there is still Marshal Dong. The East Conquering Fleet still has a vice-marshal called Xian Yang, who is overseeing the Black Sun. After Marshal Dong is killed, Xian Yang will definitely take over the marshal's position and control the situation. We have to kill him and save the Black Sun. Only then can we intimidate the East Conquering Fleet. Yin Yao thought for a moment and said, the 3 of us will go to the Black Sun. There's no need to bring the others. The 4 divine beasts have just recovered from their injuries. They still need to cultivate in seclusion for a while. Wuhan and Wushuang have just broken through to the true immortal realm. They still need to cultivate and stabilize their divine Tao foundation. Bai Long needs to stay in the 5 elements world to prevent any accidents. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku both agreed with her arrangement. One day later, the 5 elements world slowed down to the lowest speed and stopped in the void 100 million miles away from the Black Sun. Ji Tianqing took out the Tianqing battleship and flew toward the Black Sun with Yun Yao and Ji Ku. 100 million miles was considered very close to the 2 massive stars. However, it was an extremely long journey for ordinary immortals. Even though the Tianqing battleship's flying speed was comparable to that of a heavenly god realm elite. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 used 10 days to reach the Black Sun. When the Tianqing battleship landed on the blue light barrier, Ji Tianqing immediately felt that something was wrong. How can the divine light barrier of the Black Sun be so thick? Its power is twice as strong as the barrier of the purple cloud planet. Could it be that the heavenly Tao is taking special care of the Black Sun? No, it must be that the heaven punishers on the Black Sun have strengthened the divine light barrier. Yun Yao and Ji Ku also noticed this. After careful observation, they came to a conclusion. That's right. The divine light barrier of the Black Sun has been strengthened by someone. I've already sensed that there are many divine arrays inside the divine light barrier and the aura of the heaven punishers. Yun Yao was very sensitive to the aura of power. Marshal Ruyang and the heaven punishers' deployment could not escape her detection. Ji Ku looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Brother Tianqing, is there a way to enter the Black Sun? Will it be very troublesome?" Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He took out the sword of burial of heaven and said, "No matter how strong it is, it's still a heavenly god-level barrier. With the origin stone divine sword in hand, there's no pressure at all." Then, he used the divine eye secret technique and carefully observed the azure barrier. Half a day later, he found an area where the power was slightly weaker and started to break the barrier. With the help of the sword of burial of heaven, he only used 1 day to break a hole in the azure barrier. A hole that was 3 meters in diameter and 10 feet deep appeared in front of the 3 of them. Whoosh! 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 Ji Tianqing and the others passed through the passage-like hole and entered the Black Sun. At the same time, on the Black Sun, high above the boundless sky ocean, in the Golden Heaven Punisher Divine Palace, a large array that monitored the divine light barrier suddenly flashed with purple light and issued a warning. A moment later, the Heaven Punisher Martial God, who was guarding the divine array, noticed something unusual and quickly reported it to Marshal Ruyang. Marshal Ruyang, who had been recuperating for a long time, was instantly filled with fighting spirit and gave the order to gather. When the news spread, the entire Heaven Punisher Divine Palace was awakened. Many Heaven Punisher martial gods and guards gathered on the plaza and waited for Marshal Ruyang's orders. A well-planned hunting operation that had been premeditated for a long time was thus kicked off. The remaining 300 martial gods and 40,000 heaven-punishing warriors are all waiting for orders in the heaven-punishing divine palace. Ji Ku also frowned. He said gravely, "In that case, Marshal Ruyang wants to defend the heaven-punishing divine hall and fight us there." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and shook his head. "That's not necessarily true. Marshal Ruyang has already made sufficient preparations. It won't be that simple. It's just that only he knows what his plan is." After pausing for a moment, he added another sentence. "A year ago, Marshal Ruyang led over 100 martial gods and set up a large number of divine arrays on the azure light barrier. Among them, there were many divine arrays that monitored the movements of the azure light barrier. Once the azure light barrier was destroyed and an expert invaded, the divine arrays in the heaven-punishing divine palace would sound the alarm. The Lord of Windwell City happened to be involved in setting up the divine arrays, so he knew about this." Yun Yao frowned and said in a low voice, "In that case, Marshal Ruyang must know that we are here. If he is vigilant enough, he can even use some divine arrays to monitor our location." Ji Tianqing nodded. "Maybe. Marshal Ruyang is not as strong as Marshal Zhendong, but he is very cautious." Ji Ku raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, "It seems that this will be a head-on battle. What's there to be afraid of?" Ji Tianqing did not think much of it and was full of confidence. Yun Yao asked, "Now, we already know the layout of the Black Sun planet and the approximate location of the heaven-punishing divine palace. Should we continue to operate in the waning moon continent or go directly to the heaven-punishing divine palace?" "Of course we should go to the heaven-punishing divine palace and wipe out the heaven punishers," Ji Tianqing said with a serious face. If the three of us can't even take care of these small fries, how can we go to the heaven-punishing divine palace and wipe out the heaven punishers? He had already made his decision. Yin Yao and Ji Kun naturally agreed and would not stop him. Then, the three of them left Wind Well City quietly and flew toward the east. The Wind Frost continent was to the east of the Waning Moon continent. Between the two continents was the boundless Sky Sea. In order to reach the Sky Sea as soon as possible, Ji Tianqing steered the battleship and sped through the sky. In just 3 days, the battleship left the Waning Moon continent and entered the Sky Sea. Not only were there billions of fish and prawns in the boundless Sky Sea, but there were also many powerful sea beasts. When the battleship flew over the Sky Sea, Ji Tianqing and the other two saw many sea beasts that were as big as mountains. They cut through the waves and fought with their lives in the Sky Sea. Of course, to the three of them, who were peak true gods, this was a small scene. If there were any ignorant sea beasts that dared to attack them, they would definitely be blasted into pieces. Before they knew it, another day had passed. At that moment, the sun was shining brightly and the Sky Sea was turbulent. All of a sudden, 3 heaven-slicing battleships flew over from the front. They were arranged in a triangular formation as they sped toward them. Ji Tianqing noticed them, but he did not intend to avoid them. Instead, he sped up and charged toward them. Swoosh! Tianqing's battleship turned into a ray of black light and shot across the sky at lightning speed, crashing into the battleship in the middle. The 3 battleships noticed Tianqing's battleship and paused for a while. Then, they opened the main cannons at the front of the battleship and shot out blinding purple light beams. Boom! 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 3 giant purple light beams with great power blasted toward Tianqing's battleship. When the purple light beams approached, Tianqing's battleship suddenly flipped a few times and suddenly descended 300 feet, dodging the attack of the light beams. In the next moment, Tianqing's battleship crashed into the heaven-punishing battleship in the middle. Boom! Crack! In the deafening sound, the heaven-punishing battleship that was 1,000 feet long was smashed into pieces. More than half of the heaven-punishing warriors in the battleship were killed or injured. They fell into the Sky Sea like dumplings. The leader of the golden armored battleship was also injured. He fell into the sky and quickly turned around to run away. Before Ji Tianqing could say anything, Yin Yao and Ji Ku flew out of the battleship and attacked with their divine swords and spears. Swoosh! 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 Sword radiance flashed and spears covered the sky. In just 3 breaths, Yin Yao and Ji Ku killed all the heaven-punishing warriors who were lucky enough to survive. The injured golden armored battleship was also stabbed by Ji Ku's spear and his body exploded. The other 2 heaven-punishing battleships were scared out of their wits when they saw this scene. They turned around and ran away in a hurry. Yin Yao and Ji Ku returned to Tianqing's battleship. Ji Tianqing quickly piloted the battleship and started to chase after them. The 2 parties sped over the sea like 3 rays of black light shooting across the sky. The distance between the 2 of them was constantly shrinking. Chapter 2686. In order to escape, the 2 heaven-conquering battleships pushed their power to the maximum. They lit up with a dazzling purple light, dragging long purple flames behind them. As time passed, the distance between the 2 sides continued to shrink. 200 kilometers, 180 kilometers, 150 kilometers, 120 kilometers. After 15 minutes, the distance between the 2 sides had shrunk to about 20 kilometers. At such a close distance, the 2 heaven-conquering battleships were already within the attack range of Tianqing's battleship. Ji Tianqing decisively opened the main cannon of the heaven-conquering battleship and blasted out a dazzling golden beam of light. Boom! Following a loud explosion, the 10,000 feet long golden beam of light with destructive power blasted toward the heaven-conquering battleship on the left. Ji Tianqing and the others were surprised by what happened next. The heaven-conquering battleship on the left knew that it had been locked onto and had nowhere to run. Before it died, it actually released 3 dazzling purple beams of light that blasted toward the heaven-conquering battleship on the right. Kaboom! In the next instant, a deafening explosion erupted. The golden beam of light blasted the heaven-conquering battleship on the left into smithereens, bursting into golden flames. The entire heaven-conquering battleship was destroyed. Hundreds of heaven-conquering battleships and the captain of the golden armor battleship were blasted into smithereens. However, at the same time, the 3 purple beams of light struck the heaven-conquering battleship on the right. Bam! Following a muffled explosion, the heaven-conquering battleship was forcefully pushed 50 kilometers away. Furthermore, after the 3 purple beams of light were absorbed, its speed also doubled. In the blink of an eye, the heaven-conquering battleship on the right had traveled 500 kilometers, leaving Tianqing's battleship in the dust. Ah! There's such a thing. Ji Ke's eyes widened as he looked at the heaven-conquering battleship with a shocked expression. Yunyao also frowned and said in a low voice, the heaven-conquering battleship on the left knew that it was going to die, so it helped its teammate before it died. It looks like they were already prepared and planned. Ji Tianqing said in a playful tone, you mean, they were bait released by Marshal Ruyang to lure us into an ambush? Yunyao nodded and said, it's possible. Ha! Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, if that's the case, then I'll have to keep the battleship and not destroy it immediately. After all, it still has to lead us to Marshal Ruyang and the heaven-destroying army. Upon hearing this, Yunyao and Ji Ke understood what he meant and gripped their divine swords and divine spears tightly. Very quickly, 2 hours passed. A huge island appeared in front of them. The island was formed by pitch-black reefs, with a circumference of over 1,000 miles, standing alone on the ocean surface. The island was covered with a primitive jungle, and it was extremely dense. The heaven-slicing battleship, which was fleeing in panic, unleashed the last of its strength and charged towards the island without regard for anything else. Shwa! A few breaths later, the heaven-slicing battleship entered the island and disappeared into the depths of the forest. At this time, Tianqing's battleship flew across the sky unhurriedly and flew towards the island. When they were 200 miles away from the island, Yunyao and Ji Ke both raised their eyebrows and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Tianqing, there are more than a dozen heaven-slicing battleships 50 miles under the sea to our left. Brother Tianqing, there are also more than a dozen heaven-slicing battleships hidden in the depths of the sea to our right. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He pointed to the top of his head and chuckled. There are also more than a dozen heaven-slicing battleships hidden in the sky above us. Obviously, this is an ambush arranged by Marshal Ruyang and he's waiting for us to take the bait. Although he said so, he had no intention of slowing down. He controlled the battleship to continue flying towards the island. Yunyao couldn't help but ask, since we've already discovered them, why are we still entering the island? Tianqing. Aren't you worried that Marshal Ruyang has some kind of killer move? Ji Tianqing said calmly, he's just a 5th heaven true god and 300 heaven-slicing battleship captains. What kind of killer move can he have? Unless the heaven-slicing great emperor, the emperor's son, and the queen goddess are lying in ambush here at the same time, they won't be a threat to us. The rest of the heaven-slicing battleships are all useless. When he finished speaking, Tianqing's battleship had already flown to the top of the island and stopped in the air above a vast forest. At this time, a purple light shot up into the sky around the island and a barrier that covered the sky appeared. Swoosh! In just 2 breaths, the dark purple light barrier covered a radius of 1,000 miles and sealed the entire island. This was a super divine formation that was made up of 9 great formations. Its power was infinitely close to the heavenly god tier. After the formation was activated, a majestic divine power pressed down and froze the space within 1,000 miles. Then, purple lights lit up under the sea and in the sky around the island. Swoosh! 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 Hundreds of heaven-slicing battleships descended from the sky like huge black beasts and surged out from the sea. After a while, the numerous battleships formed a huge circle and surrounded the island. Every battleship opened up the divine cannons on the side and aimed hundreds of cannons at the island. Chapter 2687. Ji Tianqing, welcome to the Black Sun planet. Ben Shuai has been waiting for you for more than 2 years. You are finally here. Marshal Ruyang laughed coldly. His voice reverberated in the air above the island. For many years, there have been legends about you in our tribe. It is said that you killed the southern and eastern marshals and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of our soldiers. Now, it seems that the rumors are exaggerated. With your ability and intelligence, Ben Shuai wonders how you managed to survive until today. More than 100 golden armored warship captains and 30,000 soldiers stared at the Tianqing warship on the island. Hearing Marshal Qin Yang's words, everyone sneered disdainfully and mockingly. A few generals even waved their swords and shouted. Bastard Ji Tianqing, come out and face your death. Ji Tianqing, you must be terrified and desperate right now, right? Ha ha ha. Little bastard, only death awaits you if you go against our tribe. Marshal Ruyang is here. Tianqing, you little brat, kowtow and surrender. Ji Tianqing, do you dare to show yourself and fight? The crowd's shouts ignited the blood of many soldiers. Their fighting spirit soared. At the same time, inside the Tianqing warship, Ji Tianqing told Yun Yao and Ji Ku, Ku, you will control the warship. Yao Yao, you will fight with me. Ji Ku knew that it was safer to stay in the warship. She quickly objected and said firmly, Brother Tianqing, I will fight with you. Let senior sister control the warship. Before Ji Tianqing could say anything, Yun Yao shook her head and refused. She said calmly, Ku, the three of us are the most important people to each other. We are bound together for good or ill. No matter who it is, nothing will happen to them. On top of that, Tianqing needs my cooperation to cast the heavenly deity skill and break the ceiling formation. This. Ji Ku was at a loss for words. He was filled with worry. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao didn't say anything more and flew out in a flash. Shwa. The husband and wife appeared together and stood high in the sky, looking down at Marshal Ruyang from above. Both of them were dressed in white. Their sleeves fluttered in the wind, and their auras were noble and elegant, just like the gods of the 9 heavens. The tens of thousands of pairs of eyes around the island immediately focused on the two of them. Ji Tianqing looked at Marshal Ruyang indifferently and sneered, Ruyang, is this island the place you chose to bury yourself? Ha! More than 30,000 people will be buried with you. Your life is worth it. His domineering voice spread over a radius of 1,000 miles. The 30,000 plus people could clearly hear the fluent language of the Heaven Punisher. Many of the Heaven Punisher soldiers were instantly enraged. They started to curse and roar. Marshal Ruyang furrowed his brows. Then, his brows relaxed and he sneered disdainfully, I've long heard that your strength isn't that great, but your tone is extremely arrogant. Today, I see that it's true. Ben Shuai really can't understand. You're already surrounded and about to be turned into ashes under the bombardment of thousands of cannons. How can you still have the courage to talk nonsense here? Instead of arguing, why don't you just stretch out your neck and commit suicide on the spot? That way, you can die a more dignified death. Moreover, Ben Shuai will be merciful and let go of your 2 wives. Ben Shuai will take your head and ask the great emperor for a reward. After Ben Shuai's meteoric rise, he will definitely take good care of your wives. Ha 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 ha. Ji Tianqing sneered contemptuously. His voice was so loud that it could pierce through gold and crack rocks. People as pitifully stupid as you are getting rarer and rarer. Forget it, I don't want to waste my breath on you. Before you die, I'll give you a piece of advice. You won't have a chance to use the trump card that you've been keeping. Gather all the 10,000 heaven-slaying dogs here. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing looked around and pointed at the 30,000 soldiers in the sky. He said disdainfully, "These useless soldiers and crab generals are not enough for me to kill. They're far from enough." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Not only was Marshal Ruyang shocked and angry, but his eyes were also filled with murderous intent. The 30,000 Heaven Punisher soldiers were so angry that their faces turned red. Their blood was flowing in reverse. All of them roared and roared. What an arrogant bastard! If the heavens want a man to die, they must first make him mad. This bastard has gone mad. Ha ha ha. What a joke. Ji Tianqing is so arrogant that he's lost his mind. Ji Tianqing. Go ahead and be as arrogant as you like. These are your last words anyway. Marshal, are you still wasting time on that lunatic? Give the order to kill him. It's not enough to just kill Ji Tianqing. We must cut him into pieces and grind his bones to dust. Curses and roars resounded in the sky one after another. Especially the 100 or so golden armor captains. All of them looked like they had been injected with chicken blood. Their morale and fighting spirit were high. Marshal Zhuiyang calmed down and stared at Ji Tianqing. He put on a pitiful look and sighed, sigh. Ji Tianqing, who was hailed as the strongest opponent of our race, has lost his mind in a hopeless situation. He has become the biggest joke in the world. Since you want to die, Ben Shui will give you a quick death. Marshal Ruyang waved his hand and ordered, "Everyone, listen up. Activate the Samsara Annihilation Formation and kill Ji Tianqing." The 160 captains of the golden armored ships replied in unison. Then, everyone channeled their energy and shot out a red light into the Samsara Annihilation Formation. Hum. In an instant, the Samsara Annihilation Formation's power more than doubled and started to operate quickly. More than 90 million purple light blades appeared in the formation. They poured down like a snowstorm and drowned the entire island. Swoosh! 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 Every purple light blade was comparable to the attack of a first-level true god. The endless light blades flew back and forth and immediately shredded the island into pieces, turning it into sand and dust that fell into the sky. However, Tianqing's battleship was safe and sound. The light blades could not hurt it at all. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were in the endless light blades and were also unharmed. Ha! You dare to call this crude formation the Samsara Annihilation Formation? You're just a frog at the bottom of a well. Hilarious. Ji Tianqing sneered disdainfully and held the burial of heaven sword tightly with both hands. Yunyao and he had a telepathic connection. They did not need to talk and she understood what he meant. She immediately took out the Source Stone Divine Sword. Then, the two of them started to use their techniques. They pushed their god power to the limit, and their bodies lit up with divine light that shot into the sky. Sword breaking 9 heavens. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao shouted at the same time and swung their divine swords toward the south. Suddenly, endless golden divine light gushed out from the two divine swords, forming a 300-mile-long 9 heavens divine dragon in the sky. Roar! Accompanied by a dragon roar that tore heaven and earth and shook the universe. The 300-mile-long divine dragon sword aura slashed the dark purple divine light shield in an invincible manner. At this moment, the sun and moon lost their light and heaven and earth lost their color. The spirit chi of heaven and earth within 100,000 miles was sucked dry. The hearts of more than 30,000 soldiers of the heaven-punishing army stopped beating instantly and they all looked terrified. The soldiers of the heavenly expedition, who had been full of fighting spirit and killing intent, were all listless like eggplants that had been hit by frost. Shwa! Golden and blue lights flashed. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stepped out and stood proudly in the sky. Behind them, the 2,000 Zhang-Long Tianqing battleship floated quietly in the sky. The 100 cannons on the side of the ship were all opened, preparing for an attack that could destroy heaven and earth. The world was silent. Marshal Ruyang, who had fled thousands of miles away, was lucky enough to escape. While the soldiers were not paying attention, he quietly flew back into the crowd and stood still. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's cold voice came from the sky. "I've said it before, these chickens and dogs are not enough for me to kill. Jing Yang, it's not too late to surrender now. When I swing my sword again, you will die without a burial ground." The cold and emotionless voice was like a heavy hammer that slammed into Marshal Ruyang's heart. He was filled with fear and looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes that were about to pop out of their sockets. At this moment, he finally understood. No wonder Ji Tianqing could destroy the Southern Expedition fleet and kill the Eastern Expedition Marshal and live until today unscathed. No wonder Ji Tianqing dared to step into the Black Sun with only 2 wives. It turned out that he was so powerful. The rumors of the heavenly expedition were not true at all. Ji Tianqing's true strength was far more terrifying than the rumors said. Thinking of this, Marshal Ruyang felt a trace of regret in his heart. If he had known that Ji Tianqing was so powerful, he would not have harbored such extravagant hopes and insisted on staying on the Black Sun. If he had given up on the Black Sun and escaped without fighting, he could have preserved his strength and life. But now, it was too late to say anything. Marshal Ruyang was silent. He was full of hesitation and conflict. However, more than 100 captains and 20,000 soldiers of the heavenly expedition all looked at him. How could he surrender to Ji Tianqing in front of so many people? How could he maintain his position in the heavenly expedition race after suffering such humiliation? In the blink of an eye, Marshal Ruyang made up his mind. He pulled himself together and looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes. He shouted, "Ji Tianqing. So what if you're very strong? You don't understand the heavenly expedition race. We cannot be corrupted by wealth, and we cannot submit to power. Even if you can destroy the bodies of our warriors, you will never be able to destroy our unyielding, loyal souls. The heavenly expedition race will never submit." His powerful voice reverberated in the air above the sea. The extinguished fighting spirit of the soldiers was immediately reignited. Countless people's blood boiled, and hope reappeared in their eyes. "We will rather die than submit. Fight to the end. Fight to the death with him. We would rather die standing than live kneeling." Many martial gods and soldiers of the heavenly expedition race waved their weapons and shouted with high fighting spirit. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He only raised the sword of burial of heaven expressionlessly and used his ultimate killing move. Sword rain. He put his left hand behind his back and pointed the sword at the sky with his right hand. His voice was as loud as a bell. Suddenly, tens of thousands of stars lit up in the sky. Countless giant swords thousands of feet long fell from the sky. Before the swords arrived, an invisible force that suppressed the heavens and shattered everything had already sealed off the area within 1,000 miles. Marshal Ruyang and the 20,000 soldiers were suppressed by the invisible force. Their faces turned pale and their bodies bent. They stubbornly raised their heads and looked at the sky. When they saw the tens of thousands of meteors shooting down, everyone's eyes widened. Fear and despair filled their eyes. Boom! 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 Finally, the tens of thousands of meteor swords fell and drowned the sea within 1,000 miles. The heavens and earth became silver and bright. It was so bright that no one could open their eyes. Most of the soldiers of the heavenly expedition race closed their eyes forever under the attack of the giant swords. Along with the deafening explosion, countless whirlpools appeared in the ocean, and waves splashed out. Groups of soldiers of the heavenly expedition race were killed by the giant swords. Pieces of flesh and blood were thrown into the air. Crimson and purple blood fell into the sea and dyed the blue sea dark red. Battleships after battleships were cut in half by the giant swords and fell into the sea. But this was only the beginning of the disaster. Yin Yao also swung the Dawn Stone Divine Sword and shot out starlight sword auras. Swish! Swish! The sword auras were like shuttles, crescent moons, waterfalls and rivers. They flew across the heavens and earth. Anyone who was struck by the sword light was instantly crushed to pieces and killed on the spot. Ji Ke didn't stay idle either. He controlled the Tianqing battleship to unleash the strongest power and kept shooting out golden light beams. The golden light beams were as dense as a rainstorm and bombarded the sea repeatedly. Facing such a terrifying attack, the soldiers of the heavenly expedition race were terrified and had no chance to fight back. Even Marshal Qingyang was forced to flee in a sorry state, dodging all over the place. Chapter 2689. 30,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army against Ji Tianqing and his two companions. This was a battle where there was a huge disparity in numbers. It should have been a one-sided battle. In the end, it was indeed a one-sided massacre. However, the targets of the massacre were the soldiers of the heaven-conquering army, who outnumbered the enemy by 10,000. In the midst of the massacre, Marshal Ruyang led many captains and launched a desperate counterattack. However, the results were minimal. They could not hurt Ji Tianqing and his two companions at all. The massacre lasted for a full 45 minutes before it gradually stopped. It was not because Ji Tianqing and his two companions had exhausted their divine power and were unable to continue. It was because, almost all 30,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army had been killed. Corpses were everywhere in the chaotic thousand-mile sea. The surface of the sea was dyed dark red. All the warships had been destroyed, including Marshal Ruyang's ship. An extremely small number of survivors gathered around Marshal Ruyang, their hearts filled with despair. They saw Marshal Ruyang standing in the middle. Beside him were 6 captains covered in blood. Behind him were more than 60 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army who were wearing black armor and missing limbs. Only so few of the 30,000 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army were left. They were all seriously injured and were at the end of their rope. Everyone was in complete despair. They gave up resisting and running away. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing and his two companions were safe and sound. They stood calmly in the sky. Ji Tianqing looked at Marshal Ruyang and his companions expressionlessly. He slowly raised his left hand. Destructive divine power was accumulating in his body. In the next moment, he only needed to punch out and Marshal Ruyang and his companions would be reduced to ashes. At this moment of life and death, the hearts of the soldiers of the heaven-conquering army were in their throats. Their eyes were filled with despair. Marshal Ruyang hesitated for a moment. He took 2 steps forward and shouted anxiously, "Wait." Ji Tianqing's left hand was clenched into a fist. It stopped in mid-air and he looked at him expressionlessly. "Marshal Ruyang, what else do you have to say?" Marshal Ruyang made up his mind and bowed without hesitation. "Ji Tianqing. Ben Shuai was blind and should not have ambushed you here. Ben Shuai admits defeat. I surrender to you now. You're a peerless expert, and we're just weak ants that can't threaten you at all. Why do you have to kill us all?" The dozens of soldiers behind him also knelt in the sky and kowtowed in unison, begging for mercy. "We are willing to surrender, please spare our lowly lives, let us live." Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. "Ha ha ha. Just now, who was the one who passionately said that I don't understand the Heaven Punishers? And who was it that said righteously that the Heaven Punishers were loyal souls who would rather die than submit? Now, it seems like I really don't understand the heaven punishers. The thick sense of mockery caused Marshal Qingyang and the others' faces to turn red, and they felt extremely ashamed and angry. However, everyone lowered their heads and did not dare to refute. What was there to refute? Just now, the soldiers had been beating their chests and shouting, as if they were facing death calmly and righteously. Now, they were kneeling and surrendering, without any dignity or backbone. The words they said were like farts. How fragrant! Seeing that no one had anything to say, Ji Tianqing did not waste any more time. His left fist lit up with a dazzling divine light. Marshal Ruyang saw that he was unwilling to forgive them and immediately became worried. He decided to throw caution to the wind and roared at the top of his lungs, Ji Tianqing. Stop! As long as you spare our lives, I'm willing to tell you a huge secret. Really? Only a dozen people know this secret. You'll definitely be interested. Ji Tianqing was indeed interested. The divine light in his left hand disappeared. Oh! What secret? When Marshal Qingyang saw the opportunity, he quickly explained, this secret is related to the great emperor of our clan and the gods of the upper realm. However, I can only tell you alone. Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, all right. If that's the case, I'll spare your life for now. As for the others. As he spoke, he waved his left hand and shot out dozens of dazzling golden lights. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Dozens of golden sword lights cut through the sky and instantly pierced the heaven punishers beside Marshal Ruyang. Bang bang bang. With a series of muffled explosions, the bodies of the 6 captains and more than 60 soldiers of the heavenly expedition exploded, their bodies smashed into pieces. In the sky, only Ji Tianqing, the other 2, and Marshal Ruyang were left. Marshal Ruyang trembled as he witnessed the heaven punishers being killed in seconds. He was furious. However, his rationality soon overcame his anger. He tried his best to remain calm and looked coldly at Ji Tianqing. He gritted his teeth and said, Ji Tianqing. You're so vicious. Ji Tianqing sneered disapprovingly, ha ha ha. If you continue to spout nonsense, you'll be the next one to die. Marshal Ruyang's expression froze and he quickly shut his mouth. Ji Tianqing retracted his left hand and led Yun Yao and Ji Ku across the sky. They flew to Marshal Ruyang and stood still. Now, you should tell us the secret. Marshal Ruyang looked at Yun Yao and Ji Ku. He hesitated for a moment before saying in a low voice, this is the top secret of my clan. Only the Emperor, Empress, Prince, left and right protectors, Imperial Tutor, and the 5 marshals know about it. Nobody else knows about it. I didn't know about it before. After Marshal Zhendong died and I took over his position, I found out about this secret. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 did not reply. They listened attentively. Marshal Ruyang said with a serious expression, on the surface, the upper realms deities value our clan. They used God's grace, divine light and other means to help our clan develop and strengthen. However, in reality, our clan is just a pawn in the hands of the upper realms deities. We're lackeys that they've carefully cultivated. Our clan conquering the stars, invading the major galaxies, and dominating the trichiliocosm were all ordered by the upper realms deities. Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, why would the upper realms deities do this? The trichiliocosm is a mortal world after all. The deities don't care about it at all. I don't know the specific reason either. Marshal Ruyang shook his head and said in a low voice, I only know that this is the plan of the upper realms deities. It seems to be related to an ancient legend. What ancient legend? Yun Yao asked with a serious expression. Marshal Ruyang shook his head blankly, indicating that he did not know. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, go on. Marshal Ruyang continued, other than ordering our clan to dominate the trichiliocosm, the upper realms deities also gave an oracle to the great emperor. After that, the great emperor gave a secret order to all the marshals to search for a divine map in each of the major galaxies. This mission is very confidential and has always been carried out in secret. Divine map. Ji Tianqing narrowed his eyes. A glint flashed in his eyes and he asked in a low voice, "What divine map? Formation map? Divine weapon map or treasure map?" Marshal Ruyang smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know either. Even the great emperor can't clearly describe what the divine map looks like or what its characteristics are. We only know that any divine map that is beyond the level of a true god must be collected and handed over to the great emperor for inspection." Chapter 2690. Ji Tianqing was very interested in the divine map. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. His heart was filled with questions and he wanted to find out the truth. Unfortunately, Marshal Ruyang knew very little about this. Even the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher did not know what the divine map was that the upper realm deities wanted. Ji Tianqing was somewhat unwilling to give up. He tried to interrogate Marshal Huiyang in a roundabout way, but failed to get any useful information. After revealing these secrets, Marshal Ruyang was like a deflated balloon. He was dispirited. "Ji Tianqing, I've told you all the information and secrets I know. You should also fulfill your promise and let me live." Marshal Ruyang looked up at Ji Tianqing and said expressionlessly. However, before he could finish, Ji Tianqing interrupted him. "The top secret you mentioned is not only vague and ambiguous, but it's also hard to tell if it's true or false. I'll have to verify that you're telling the truth before I consider sparing your life." Marshal Ruyang frowned and asked cautiously, "How do I verify it?" "Search your soul, of course," Ji Tianqing said as he extended his right palm and released a mysterious black light that enveloped Marshal Ruyang. "No." Marshal Ruyang turned pale with fright. He roared with grief and anger, "Ji Tianqing! You untrustworthy bastard, you're despicable and shameless." As he cursed, he unleashed all his strength and tried to teleport away. However, his injuries were too severe. How could he escape from Ji Tianqing's grasp? In the next moment, he was enveloped by the mysterious black light. An incomparably strong divine soul power invaded his body and tightly wrapped around his divine soul. Marshal Ruyang's soul suffered a heavy blow. His consciousness blurred and he fainted. After that, Ji Tianqing forcibly seized his soul's memories, causing his soul to be injured and he remained unconscious. After 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing finished refining Marshal Ruyang's memories and ended the spellcasting. He slowly withdrew the mysterious black light and slapped the unconscious Marshal Ruyang with his palm, killing him instantly. When facing the Heaven Punishers, there was no need to talk about morality or trust. Moreover, he had never promised Marshal Ruyang that he would let Marshal Ruyang live. When Yunyao and Ji Ku saw that he had killed Marshal Ruyang, they both asked about the situation. "Tianqing, is Marshal Ruyang's secret true or false?" "Big brother Tianqing, have you already gotten the answer?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and answered, "I've already refined Marshal Ruyang's memories, so I have a better understanding of the Heaven Punisher race." He wasn't lying. Everything he said was true. The Heaven Punishers were indeed the lackeys of the deities of the upper realm. They were ordered by the deities of the upper realm to invade all the major star zones in an attempt to dominate the 3,000 worlds. During this process, they were secretly searching for the whereabouts of the divine map. They collected many treasures that seemed to be the divine map and handed them to the Heaven Punisher for inspection. Yunyao frowned and thought for a while, then asked, "The deities of the upper realm ordered the Heaven Punishers to invade the 3,000 worlds because of an ancient legend. What legend is it?" Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment, then said calmly, "Maybe it has something to do with the Five Elements world. After all, the Five Elements world is the most special star among the 3,000 worlds. It once coexisted with the heavenly realm and the dragon realm. It's an eternal main world." Ji Ku came to a sudden realization and quickly nodded. That's right. Big Brother Tianqing's analysis is right. It's very possible. Yunyao nodded slightly. It's indeed possible. Many years ago, the Heaven Punishers knew about the existence of the Dawn Stones and reported this to the deities of the upper realm. The deities of the upper realm were also very interested in the Dawn Stones and ordered the Heaven Punishers to do their best to steal them. If the deities of the upper realm let the Heaven Punishers dominate the 3,000 worlds in order to find the 5 elements world, then, everything that happened before makes sense. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, Ji Ku asked again, Big Brother Tianqing, you've refined Marshal Ruyang's memories. Do you know what the divine map that the deities of the upper realm are looking for is? Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained, Marshal Ruyang's position is lower, so he only knows a little. He doesn't know the details. The person who knows the most about this should be the Heaven Punisher. However, there's something you need to take note of. The deities of the upper realm can interfere with the heavenly Tao's rules and help the Heaven Punishers avoid the 9 heavenly tribulations. This means that the deities are at least at the peak of the God King stage. The divine map that they want is definitely a treasure above the God King stage. Coincidentally, I have a formation that surpasses the God King stage and is infinitely mysterious. Ji Tianqing was talking about the Heaven Punisher formation hidden under the chaotic fog in Kenshin's tomb. 1,000 years ago, Kenshin had obtained the Heaven Punisher formation after a near-death experience in some ancient ruins. This item was known as the ultimate mystery of the God realm and contained the secret of immortality. Therefore, countless God Kings went crazy for it and tried to steal it at all costs. Kenshin's death was definitely related to the Heaven Punisher formation. Ji Ku had participated in the Great War of the Gods and knew the reason why Kenshin was surrounded by so many God Kings. When she heard Ji Tianqing's words, she trembled and immediately understood what Ji Tianqing meant. Big Brother Tianqing, you mean, the Heaven Punisher formation? It's very possible. Ji Tianqing nodded. Ji Ku's eyes widened and she said in disbelief, we've already died 1,000 years ago and the Heaven Punisher formation disappeared with us. Those bastards from the God realm are still thinking about the Heaven Punisher formation and won't give up until they find it. Ji Ku paused for a moment. She thought of something even more terrifying and said with a complicated expression, if the God realm deities from the upper realm are asking the Heaven Punisher tribe to find the Heaven Punisher formation, then that means, the deities behind the Heaven Punisher tribe are the God Kings from back then. There are mortal enemies. Yun Yao's expression also changed and she said in a serious tone, I'm afraid that the current God realm is no longer the same. The ones in power are most likely the God Kings. Even though Tianqing has died 1,000 years ago, they haven't given up on searching for the Heaven Punisher formation. It looks like even if we ascend to the God realm, we might not be safe. We'll definitely face greater danger. After the 3 of them analyzed the situation, the truth gradually surfaced. Ji Tianqing smiled and said in a playful tone, haha. Fate is indeed a dead knot that can't be untied. Even though I've died 1,000 years ago and reincarnated, I still can't escape fate. In the end, I have to fight to the death with those bastards and settle my grudges. The Heaven Punisher tribe, the 5 elemental world, and the Heaven Punisher formation are the things that led me to the path of revenge. Whether we know it or not, whether we're willing or not, we can't escape fate's arrangement. Yun Yao also nodded and said, in the mortal world, we have to fight to the death with the Heaven Punisher tribe. Even if we ascend to the God realm, we have to solve the mystery and take revenge on those God Kings. Ji Ku looked at the sky with a burning gaze and said in a determined tone, in this life, we definitely won't lose. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.